everybody. If you can keep your videos off until it's your turn to present, that would be the best. So I do have a camera here, so anybody in the audience is going to be captured via the live stream. I just let people know ahead of time. It's posted around here, but can you just rename the timer? Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michelle Jones, Corporate Officer for the Regional District. I'm going to call today's Finance Committee meeting to order for Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. I'd first like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Swan Nation. And the next item of business is election of chair. I'll call 3 times for nominations for the position of chair. So I'll call the first time for nominations for the position of chair. Director Brander.
I'd like to nominate Director Powell.
Okay, thank you. Director Powell, you've been nominated for position of chair. Do you accept this nomination?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I would like to call a second time for nominations for the position of chair. I would like to call a third and final time for nominations for the position of chair. Hearing no further nominations, Director Fall, you've been elected chair by acclamation. I'll turn over the meeting to you.
Okay, thank you, Corporate Officer. My goal as chair will be to ensure that meetings are welcoming to the public and run smoothly so that board members can focus productively on the business brought before the committee. My skills as a mathematician won't hurt. I hope to attend more Finance Committee meetings in person for the coming year, but we'll sometimes do this remotely, and I hope the internet connection holds. And as that will especially be clear after the board considers and possibly revises the meeting schedule. I thank the members for their support, and I also want to acknowledge and thank the excellent service by Director Dowd in his role over the past years, and hope that I am able to serve as capably as he did. We have a long agenda, so I will dive right in. The first item up is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, or would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Looks like it's anonymous. Opposed? None. Carried. Thank you. The next item is adoption of the minutes. Are there any revisions that any members would like to make? Seeing none, would someone like to move the adoption?
So moved.
See a mover, a seconder. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. The next is delegations and inquiries. We welcome all the delegations who are coming tonight and want everyone to feel comfortable approaching the QRD board. There are 8 delegations on our agenda, which is quite long. So I would like to request all delegations to keep presentations succinct, after which directors may ask questions. For delegations speaking about grant applications, the board will debate those applications later in the agenda, so there will be an opportunity for board members to dive in. So first up on our agenda is Ms. Rebecca Burbank from the Powell River Public Library.
Thank you so much. I think I can see the presentation there. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the introduction, Director Paul. My name is Rebecca Burbank. I'm the Chief Librarian of Public Library. And I'd like to start by offering my congratulations on your recent election to the Board of Directors. Thank you all for standing for this position. I'm here on behalf of the Library Board today to present the 2023 budget presentation, as well as a few highlights from 2022's activities. I will try and keep you brief. Before I show you what we've been working on, I did want to just provide a quick overview of the relationship between the regional district and the library. The library, under the Library Act, is a municipal library. We do also have an operating agreement with the regional district, which agrees to provide services to regions or areas A, B, C, and D. And that guarantees residents of those areas the same level of service that residents of the city would receive. So I'll start with a few highlights from this past year. It was a great year for programming. There are a few that I really wanted to draw your attention to. It's just a small taste of what our staff have been able to put forward. We're really proud of everything that they have done this year. I wanted to start with Summer Reading Club. This is a tradition, a program that we've had for a very long time. Every summer we put on about 8 weeks of programs, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, of literacy-focused programs to engage children aged 4 to about 15 on reading, literacy, and engaging with the library during the summer break. And this, following the COVID restrictions in 2020 and the flood that we had in 2021, was the first year that we've had this in person since 2019. So it was a great year. We had a huge celebration to kick it off. The programs include things like book clubs for younger and older children. We have workshops with them all week. There's also active, more hands-on kind of building programs that they have. We kick the whole thing off with a big parade, and there's a giant celebratory finale for the kids that are with us all summer. Our staff were able to put on 29 programs and events. We had over 330 attendances, which was a great show. The people in the photo there are our Summer Reading Club team, as that is Mel, Justin, and Sonia in disguise there. Just a ton of fun. It's a program that we're very proud of and happy to continue with. One of the other successes we saw this year was the ability to add a brand new collection to the library. We launched the Indigenous and Métis collection in September, leading up to the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This was made possible with grant funding from the province through the COVID Relief and Recovery grant that we received. We launched this in collaboration with staff from the Tla'amin Nation. They generously provided input on guiding the goals of that collection and our selection decisions moving forward. It's been very well received so far. It's got titles in there for adults, teens, and children. And the main goals for this collection are to draw attention and make more available the voices, stories, and histories of Indigenous peoples and Métis. So it also supports many of the calls to action, which speak to the need for added education and access to Indigenous cultures and languages. So one that we're very proud to have added. One of the components of the library's service area that I've always really enjoyed is that we have a very dedicated community of writers. Photo here is Gabrielle Pendergast. She was our inaugural writer in residence. This was a program that I mentioned to the board last year at our presentation, something we were excited for about a year ago, and it just wrapped up on the 4th of November. Gabrielle was here in town for just over 2 months working with our staff. She attended programs as sort of the guest star and provided a writer in residence service for 9 weeks. So what that means is she came to the community, she worked with our writers. She also went out to schools, which was a really fantastic opportunity. We know that the people coming into the library are already dedicated to that writing commitment. Just by coming to the program, we know they're already engaged with that. But by sending her out to the schools, we're meeting children and youth who maybe aren't engaged with writing yet. And so that was, I think, one of the biggest wins, having her visiting the schools, was having her connect with some students who maybe were on the fence. So we had a lot of really great feedback on that. While she was here, she took part in 35 events and programs. She also supported 33 writers in our community with no cost one-on-one session, editing advice, just someone to talk to about the writing industry, which is a great service. And we saw 756 total attendances at the programs that Gabrielle was involved with. I think it was a great success. She was a fantastic person to have as our first writer in residence, and we're looking forward to continuing this program in 2023. I just want to give you sort of a snapshot of the breakdown of library card distributions as comparing the regional district, the city, the Pla'amin Nation, and our patrons who fit in the other category. Fairly similar to what we saw last year. We like to just make sure you're aware of this, and it does echo the local grant split as well, which I think is a nice component. Looking at the grant request from the library to the regional district, the library is putting forward a request of $433,883 in the 2023 budget. I'm showing you what is 4 years of grant requests here. And that's because going into 2023, we are looking at a larger jump than we have in the past couple of years. But in looking at it over 4 years, that number is tempered quite a bit. So going into 2023, we're looking at a 9.5% increase. But over the course of those 4 years, 2020 through 2023, it's just over 13%. The years 2021 and 2022 saw much lower increases. I wanted to show you also our proposed budget revenue. It shows an overview of all the sources of our revenue and how that has changed in the past year. There's a few areas specifically I'd like to draw your attention to. First is the continued rise that we have in operational revenue. This was something we had been hoping for and are thankfully seeing. 2020 and 2021, we weren't able to generate much from room bookings due to the pandemic restrictions and then the flood that we had, which closed us for almost 5 months. So I'm thankful to say that those room bookings are coming back. I did also want to draw attention to the COVID-related funding for cleaning, which has fallen away entirely with the lifting of restrictions. That was a request we had put forward in the previous 2 budgets. And you'll see here there's also a transfer from reserve to offset our local grant requests. The pandemic and flood closures I've mentioned did result in an unanticipated surplus. So we've been using that to offset our grant requests locally. The view of the revenue that the library receives from other sources beyond just the qathet Regional District and the city. Those sources are deducted first when looking at our revenue, and the remainder is split between the city and the regional district. The current regional district portion based on the census is 30.97, and the city portion is just over 69%. So some of the other revenue streams that we have are grants from the province, grants from library federations, federal grants. We do receive funding from the Pla'amin Nation, and in previous years we had received funding for the Safe Restart grant related to COVID and a provincial grant. And again, the transfer from reserve is listed there as well.
Point of order, Chair.
Ms. Burbank, we have, you're a bit over time. Could you maybe
Pardon me.
wrap it up? We're going over.
I will.
Right?
No,
Okay.
You do have this in your package, I believe. Could I check? Okay.
Yes, it's in our package.
Of course.
Mhm.
So that last slide just shows again another breakdown of the local government contributions and how that's changed over the past year. Thank you so much for your time today. My apologies for going a bit over Director Paul.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, Ms. Burbank. Now there's an opportunity for any directors who may have some questions for you to ask if they have any. Director Brander.
Thank you, Chair. It's not so much a question, just more a comment. I've been lucky enough to serve as a library trustee the last few years, and I've just been really impressed with how Rebecca and the staff have weathered the storms that she mentioned, COVID and the flood. And if I recall, I even had a bear that was showing up at the back door for a little while there, right? The Writer in Residence program was fantastic. They're always offering great programming to the community. And from what I've seen, they've been very responsible with their budget. So they do it's a great asset to the community. And I want to thank Rebecca for her continuing service.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Director Phil. Thank you, Rebecca. I was really excited to see the uptake on the summer program. That was awesome. I think the library programs are extremely valuable to the community, and I liked hearing about it at this point. There was I think an error on the proposed operating budget expenses where it says the facilities have gone down by 2.8% and it should be up. Just FYI. OCD me.
When looking at the facilities cost, in one of the slides that you've got, it includes the COVID clean.
Yes, so the figure for budget 2022 says 315,607, and then the proposed for 2023 says 324,384, and then it says it goes down by 2.8%. But it indeed is 2.8%, but it's in the other direction.
Okay.
Is there any other questions? Director Gisborne and then Director McCormick.
Thank you for coming in today. I have a question. My understanding is that the cost sharing between the electoral areas of the regional district and the municipality is for operating, and that's split on population. So I'm looking at the last page of your slide, and I'm seeing an increase for the municipal contribution of 11.7% for operation. And I'm seeing an increase for electoral area of 13.6% for operation. So I'm just wondering why they wouldn't go up the same since it's.
The census data shifted. And so this was the first year that we used the new data, which did result in those not matching.
Okay, we have a few more
All
people in
other
the rural
years.
area. That answers my question. No further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentation, Rebecca. I have one quick question on the page 2023 proposed operating budget expenses. And when I look at the first line item, it's labor 891,000 in 22, going up to 983 in 23. And I'm just wondering what that, are you hiring more people now that COVID's over, or why that big jump in labor costs?
It's contractual increases. We are planning on keeping service levels the same.
Okay, so it's all contractual. Thank you.
Director Doubt.
Yeah, just thanks for the report. It's pretty clear. But I see that when we look at the grant request summary, if 2% in 2021 increase 1.4% in 2022, and then 9.5 for 2023. It's just a bigger change than we've been used to in the grant request. And I wonder if you could give us a little more detail on why it's higher than it was in previous years.
Largely that through the chair. I apologize.
Okay, yes.
Largely, yes, that is tied to that contractual labor increase. We have worked to offset with the transfer from reserve. And in previous years, that last year we used a transfer from reserve as well. And it was the decision of the board to not move forward with covering operational costs with reserve funding, reserve spending only.
That's what I thought the answer would be. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Burbank. The only comment I'd make is I'm on the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board, and it has been a bit of a tough time for libraries, and we're facing similar issues and a budget increase. But thank you, and we'll be considering this during our budget deliberations.
Thank you all.
Okay, next up is Samantha Gambling and Rachael Sherstad for the qathet Remembrance Day for Lost Species.
Great. Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm just going to share my screen here and make sure that you can all see it. Okay. There we go. And I will play from the beginning. Okay, just you can see my slides and not my notes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you so much for allowing me to give this delegation this evening. My name is Sam Gambling, and I'm currently reaching you actually from the traditional homelands of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Esquimalt and Songhees nations in Victoria, BC. I had the honor of living on Klamath territory last year, where I made strong connections with community and the land. And Rachael and I'm not sure if Rachel's there in person, but I'm going to be the one giving the presentation. Rachael and I volunteer with Qathet Old Growth, which is a grassroots advocacy group for ancient forests and forestry reform for Qathet region. And this event I'm going to be speaking about this evening is being hosted by Qathet Old Growth with support from Qathet Art Council, Klamath Nation, School District 47, and Coastal Partners in Conservation. So today I'm going to share just some information about this upcoming event that we're hosting called the Remembrance Day for Lost Species, including both the context and the scope of the event. And then I will just end by reiterating our request for a grant and other supports from the Qathet Regional District. So as a bit of context, the world is currently experiencing its sixth mass extinction. More than 500 species of land animals are on the brink of extinction and are likely to be lost within 20 years. So-called British Columbia currently has 1,807 species of animals and plants at risk of extinction, more than any other province or territory in Canada. This includes a dozen or more species and ecological communities at risk in the Qathet region. Despite this immense threat to our natural and social ecosystems, we have no rituals for coping with extinction, ecological destruction, or environmental loss. And subsequently, eco-anxiety is rising in locations such as Qathet, which is intimately feeling the effects of climate change and habitat loss. I know I personally felt this acutely last summer while I was living in the Paradise Valley with the heat dome and the forest fires, and I personally didn't know how to navigate these feelings. But there's an opportunity in this anxiety. According to Joanna Macy, an activist and deep ecologist, providing a real outlet for grief can help people take action and change the world for the better. In the face of overwhelming social and ecological crises, honoring and working through grief can help people transform despair and apathy into constructive, collaborative action. In 2011, a woman named Persephone Pearl organized the first ever Remembrance Day for Lost Species in the UK to do just that. So every year around the world, thousands of people have taken part in a wide range of events exploring the stories of extinct and threatened species, cultures, and communities each year. So this provides a space for the public to honor and mourn, celebrate, and commit to action. Over the past decade, the project has evolved, with its advocates hoping it to serve as an opportunity to learn about and respond to structural oppression and inequity, as well as being a recurrent space for contemplating biodiversity loss and emotions that arise with this topic. So in talking with Rachael and other members of the community, we knew we had to host a Remembrance Day for Lost Species here in Qathet. Rachael and I, along with folks from Qathet Old Growth, Qathet Art Council, SD 47, Klamath Nation, and a large network of artists, activists, ecologists, and friends across the region, are hosting a 2-day event on November 26th and 27th that will highlight and harness local talent, knowledge, stories, and community. The goal of this event is to provide a space for the qathet community to process the loss of local animals, habitats, Indigenous peoples and cultures and ways of life, celebrate the resilience and spirit of those who are still here, learn the opportunities to contribute to local conservation efforts, and commit to action. So we hope this event is going to provide a space for the public to recognize and mourn the loss of local animals, ecosystems, and cultures, and offer an opportunity to connect deeply with the land and with each other. We aim to inspire collective action to prevent further extinction of animals and ecosystems and cultures in our region. So the first day of this event will include a collaborative storytelling and aerial performance and a collective shrine building, followed by a Q&A with the performers. So Naomi Steinberg is a internationally renowned storyteller coming from Vancouver, and Keely Stills is a local aerial, I want to call her an expert. She's absolutely incredible aerial choreographer and performer. They're the two artists leading this performance with support from local musicians and Klamath elders and community. And then the 40-minute performance, which is set in the intertidal zone, will integrate aerial performance, storytelling, original music, and soundscape, all inspired by one species that has largely disappeared from qathet waters, which is herring. So the performance will highlight the cultural and ecological relevance of herring to the Klamath people and land, the sobering history of local herring populations, the interconnectedness of marine and terrestrial systems that rely on herring, and the resilience of herring as a metaphor for hope and possibility in this era of the sixth mass extinction. And the performance will be designed to move participants through stages of grief and hope, life and death, all grounded in our local qathet ecology. And the shrine building will be led by artist Joshua DeGroot in collaboration with fellow artists living in the region. So it's a really collaborative and beautiful process that's coming up in a couple of weekends. The following day, on November 27th, there's going to be a film screening followed by a panel discussion featuring local and internationally renowned conservation experts. So Chris Morgan is a conservationist and ecologist from the US, really well known. His screening of Bear Trek, which is a film that highlights the world's most elusive and endangered bears. And then this screening is going to be followed by a panel conversation featuring Chris Morgan alongside local conservation experts and activists. One of our panelists will be the executive director of Coastal Partners and Conservation Society, who works in Powell River with other organizations on habitat restoration and conservation research. And the panel is going to be facilitated by Kelly Chapman, a local ecologist and environmental planner with 30 years of experience working with governments, First Nations, and NGOs on biodiversity conservation. So we're hoping that this combination of activities will appeal to all of an individual's senses, open the hearts, minds, and bodies of the local community to process this loss of cultural and biological diversity and foster meaningful connection and inspire action. Not only do we hope this event can be a time of grieving and healing, but we also hope it'll be a time of awe and wonder, providing a space to celebrate and build courage and hope in the future of qathet. And then also this event is going to highlight local artists and talent, illustrating the potential for the role of art in conservation and conversations around conservation and social and ecological issues, and deepen the public's understanding of local environmental and cultural issues. Lastly, we hope the event will be a fun way to get out into the community and spend time together. So in sum, we're very excited for this event next week, and we would really appreciate the regional district's support, helping to make sure we can pull off this event successfully. In our grant application, we requested $2,000 to help pay our artists and contributors. We would definitely be open to more. Ticket sales are a little slow at the moment, but we've requested $2,000, and we really look forward to hearing about your decision on this. And I also ask all of you here today to please spread the word. We have these event posters, which I can provide you that you can share over social media or email. We've got a Facebook event page with lots of ongoing information about the activities and the contributors. And I really hope, lastly, to see you all at the show on November 26th and 27th. So thank you very much. That's my presentation. Thanks for having me here and taking the time today.
Thank you, Ms. Gambling. Are there any questions from the board for the delegation? Director Gisborne?
Thank Thank you very much, Chair. I have a question, and it has to do with later on the agenda, we have the financial submissions. And I see on, I think it's page 184, the expenditures are listed at $34,700. But on the next page, I see expenditures listed at $25,200. So I'm just kind of, I think maybe I made a mistake. I would like a little bit of clarification.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure of those page numbers because I don't think I have that same document. But our expenditures for the first day and the second day of the event are different. So our expenditures for the first day of the event are $25,200 as far as I have here, but I may have to take a look at those numbers and see what you're referring to exactly. So far, our expenditures are quite flexible as well because we do have a lot of people donating their time and offering in-kind contributions to this. And there's people who we would love to provide honorary to, but we may not be able to if we don't have enough funding. So the expenditures are definitely flexible, but I'm happy to send over or take a look at that list again and make sure that I've got all of the details clarified for you.
Okay, I think that might explain it. It's that one day is budgeted and the other one is probably for another day. And just to clarify, this is the Finance Committee, so we don't make a final decision here. So if I make any mistakes, then we'll have some time to smooth that out. Thank you very much. No further questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for the delegate? Seeing none, well, thank you for your presentation. We'll be considering your application later on in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, our next presentation, our delegation is from Siobhan Brown and Chelsea Friesen for the qathet justice. I don't have the words in front of me here.
Sure, they'll.
Sorry, restorative justice. Restorative justice. Thank you. The community justice program. Thank you. Yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us this evening. Pleasure to be here. I'm Siobhan Brown. I'm the program coordinator for qathet Community Justice.
And I'm Chelsea Friesen. I'm the Youth Restorative Action Program Coordinator and Program Assistant.
Yeah, so we're here to talk a little bit about our program and our application for funding. I would like to note that at the time that we submitted this application, we were not an independent society, and we now are an independent society. So the agenda reads LIFT is requesting, and actually in practice, it will be QCJ as an independent society requesting the money. We will be fully independent April 1st, 2023. And that's what we're hoping for the funding for. So for those who don't know, restorative justice is a process that brings together responsible parties and affected parties, as well as community members. Our trained volunteers guide them through a dialogue. So we go through suitability, make sure it's an appropriate case for restorative justice, prep the parties separately, talk about kind of what happened in the conflict or crime and what needs to be done to make it better. And then when everyone is ready, we bring them together in a dialogue circle. And then there's a kind of follow-up period where the resolution that is agreed to in the circle, that time frame changes depending on what the case is. But we kind of take people through that process and make sure they're staying accountable to what they agreed to. I included our annual report with the package this year, I believe. So just wanted to run over a couple of those numbers. Last year, we had 7 referrals, 32 participants. Of those, 6% were north of town, 6% were south, 70% were within the city, and about 18% were other, or their participation didn't require them to disclose their location. Over 800 people in the community were impacted by our programming last year. And I wanted to note that I think our referrals this year, well, I know our referrals this year will be an up from that. We already have 7 referrals at this point, and we recently signed an MOU with Crown Council. So we can now get referrals directly from Crown. Previously, a lot of them came from the RCMP. And that really just kind of re-emphasizes the fact that we can get referrals at any stage in the criminal court process. And we can also run parallel. So you can go through a criminal court process and you can go through a restorative justice healing process as well.
Yes, and it was like about a 50-50 split between youth and adult cases as well, which leads into kind of my focus, which is youth restorative action. So it's a youth-led restorative justice program, primarily meets within Brooks Secondary Schools. We meet bi-weekly. There's about 6 core youth committee members and about 10 that come and go, some that have already graduated. The things that we do there is we give presentations. So next week we're doing grade 8 presentations just about restorative justice and what sitting in circle and how circles look and how that facilitates dialogue. They've planned pretty much the whole thing. They're facilitating the whole thing. They've done it 2 years in a row now. We also did a Pro-D workshop for teachers and EAs in October, and which they also planned and facilitated the whole thing. And we got invited back for February for that. We also do youth training, facilitator training, so they know how to run their own cases. So when we have casework with youth, we try to get at least one in there to help out. Yeah, and we also do community dialogues. They're going to do lunchtime dialogues with students starting at the end of this month. And yeah, it's just to facilitate a better, stronger community in the school. We also do strategic planning meetings with them outside of the school, and that takes place in our office. So all of our cases take place in the office. There's about 2 to 5 meetings per participant, with probably 2 to 4 participants per case, and then one big circle together. So it's a lot of time spent in the office, and it's really critical to our work just for the flexibility of like scheduling a case, not having to go other places, and also really important for the confidentiality and privacy of the participants. And it's also really accessible. It's on the bus route near the library, so everyone should be able to get there. We host our subcommittee meetings there as well. We have 4 subcommittees. We have community engagement, volunteer and training, program development, and advocacy. And our core strategic planning takes place there as well. We meet with community members. We're having an open house next Friday. We're going to be inviting in the community to see our space and learn more. And we also consult with other organizations to facilitate conversations, tough conversations that they might help with.
Yeah, so kind of moving forward, we obviously will continue with our core programming for criminal and non-criminal offenses, but we really want to put a focus on this upcoming year for vulnerable populations, people experiencing homelessness, marginalized or racialized community members, and to keep charging forward with the youth program has just been doing so amazing. And I kind of wanted to note that the UBCM has endorsed multiple different resolutions over the years from 2007 all the way up to now, advocating for more restorative justice in our communities. The most recent one citing in particular street crime, repeat offenses, and disorderly conduct as key concerns around the province. So we really want to focus in on that for this year and try and get more referrals in those areas. And it also said in some of those resolutions that there's this like public perception that the community does not have a say in the justice system. And restorative justice is kind of a direct response to that, right? The whole point is that it empowers the people who are directly affected to make decisions about what happens next. So yeah, and you know, we also know that the Attorney General and Minister for Housing and the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General are working really hard on funding for these kinds of things. We have representation in Burja, the Vancouver Island Region Restorative Justice Association, and RJABC, which is the Restorative Justice Association of BC. So we are trying to get ourselves at those tables to really advocate for more sustainable funding. But in the meantime, yeah, like we need our office, we need to stay open to be able to provide restorative justice services. And those services are really, really important in this community. Yeah.
open to questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentations, and I appreciated having the annual report. It has a lot of good information to prepare to understand better the good work you're doing. Open it up for any questions from the board. I see Director Dout.
That was my hand waving away there. So first off, thanks for coming again, and thanks for clarifying and setting yourself up as a separate organization and totally independent. So I know that caused some discussion among the board members the last time you were here. And you see that, you know, all of your funding comes either from government, the city of Powell River, or is that regional district is what you're asking for today. And I just wonder how, a couple of questions. The first one is, how does more funding translate into more services from your organization? And how many or what share of clients do you have on one side or the other of the equation that come from outside of the city of Powell River and the region?
So yeah, this past year, in terms of the participation in the restorative justice casework, it was 6% from North and 6% from South. And then, yeah, some others and 7% coming from the city. In terms of the kind of government grant funding stuff, yeah, we are trying to set ourselves up for more long-term sustainability by applying for charity status this year. So our hope is that that will kind of diversify some of our funding sources, so we're not so dependent on the government grants. And then more funding equaling more services. So yeah, for us primarily, really it's staffing, to be able to staff the youth program and give them the supports. We have just myself as an employee, and Chelsea is kind of part-time, but putting a lot of volunteer hours in. So yeah, our kind of core cost things there are the office and staffing, and training.
Volunteer honoraria.
Yeah, a little bit of volunteer honoraria. I mean, I feel like we, you know, this community is so amazing and it's so supportive that we can find, like, we receive donations and that's so great. And we can find kind of smaller grants to support programming throughout the year. But those things of like office staff, training fees and admin.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I see Director Elliott and then Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you so much for coming here. Congratulations on your society status. That must have been quite an accomplishment. Quite right that UBCM did approve some resolutions. The city also had a meeting with the Attorney General where we talked about restorative justice in our community and a possible pilot, which hasn't gone forward to ask yet. My question to you, with your signing on an agreement with Crown Council, did they offer to fund the cases they refer your way? Was there any kind of an agreement around that? And did you ask for that?
It was very explicit in the memorandum of understanding that there would be no financial support associated with it. So the MOU template was something that had been in development with Crown Council for years. They consulted many different restorative justice organizations throughout the province. And I think that was advocated for fairly hard, but couldn't swing it. So yeah, they've explicitly said.
The question was asked and they said no.
I wasn't at those tables, so I can't say for sure, but I know that they consulted with multiple programs, that programs have been asking for core sustainable funding for a long time, and prosecution didn't go with it.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Director McCormick, and I'll just note that I see the timer is flashing a little bit, but
yes,
but
I see.
Director McCormick.
Well, I'll be really quick because I'm just trying to understand how you measure success with the cases that you have. And so you would, through the process of interviews, bring the two sides to the table, the victim and the perpetrator. And do you measure success with how many victims kind of walk away satisfied that there has been some restorative justice? How do you measure that success part?
Yeah, for sure. We have evaluation kind of throughout the process. So 1 month after the case is closed, we do an evaluation call with a set of questions, which include, do you feel like justice was done? Would you use our process again? How can we improve? All these kinds of things. And that's done with the case coordinator for the case team. And then 3 months after that, I make another call and do another evaluation so they can speak to somebody else. And if anything else has kind of come up.
Do you have a success rate or a rate that would measure how many cases were happily concluded?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that I can't say off the top of my head, but I would throw out, I have not done a single evaluation where people said they were unsatisfied with the process. So it's either being satisfied or very satisfied.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions, noting that we're already below the time? Okay, I would like to thank you both for coming to us. Your presentation was good, and we'll talk about the requests later in the agenda.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, our next delegation is from Carol Herder from the Lang Bay Community Club.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Herder, and I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Lang Bay Community Club. We're a nonprofit organization south of town, and the purpose of our grant application was to, or is to replace and upgrade our outdoor lighting. BC Hydro has indicated through emails and letters that they intend to dismantle the outdoor pole lighting that we have. So we need to replace that. Both the Lang Bay Community Club and you, the qathet Regional District, we have written letters to BC Hydro. As far as I know, we have not received a response, unless you have. So we have stated the risk to public safety if the lighting is removed. This lighting, it adds security to the property. So it's certainly, it's necessary. We have to do something about it. The property is used daily. It's a gathering place for events and activities. On December the 4th, we are having a seniors Christmas dinner, and one of those seatings is in the evening. So, we need that light. In addition, we're a polling station for, all the government elections. The school bus uses the property to pick up and drop off. And we have a rural bus stop adjacent to the pole lighting. And, it's also a meeting place in the event of a natural disaster south of town. So it would run our generator and things. So BC Hydro, when they remove the pole lighting, we would like to replace it, of course, with an LED light. And we would also like to add some lighting onto the building. The pole lighting would very likely be on a timer or dawn to dusk fixture. And the lighting on the building would be controlled from inside the building when it's in use. We currently have 99 members, and most of our membership is area B and C, as Mark and Clay know. In this day and age, the Lang Bay Hall property is a rare community asset that the rural community obviously supports. So I'm being very brief here. In closing, the Lang Bay Community Club hopes that the qathet Regional District will support our grant application. So thank you for inviting me, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Herder, and it's completely understanding, and I can understand frustration with BC Hydro.
Okay.
So I don't know if the RD could do anything on that front, but the request before us is, of course, for funding for a grant. So I will open up the floor to questions. I see Director Gisborne.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'm taking a look at our the grant request and the amount on the staff report for the recommendation. I'm just straining my eyes a little here. The amount requested is $6,890.
Yes, correct.
And the recommendation on the agenda is to provide $1,723. So that would leave a bit of a difference. If you don't get the full amount, what is your organization's plans for making up the difference?
If I'm assuming this amount would cover the pole, the parking lot lighting, I think. Anything above that was to be an upgrade to add to the property because the pole lights the parking lot. Okay, with outdoor lighting, we could use the gardens, you know, we can have evening events and that sort of thing. So that's the main priority, is that pole.
Okay, so that kind of just gives me a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
So is the 6,890 just for the pole?
No, oh no,
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 sorry.
that's for the
The
whole thing.
1,723 is for the pole.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm assuming that amount is for the pole. I mean, I didn't come up with that amount, so I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Director Gisborne. Director Brender.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming in this afternoon. Appreciate it. I was going to ask about how many days per week the hall is used, but you already have gone into that. And I understand it's used quite often at night as well. And as we all know, nights are long this time of year, so having additional light is very important. I understand there's a bus stop outside. Is that also used for students as well?
The bus stop, no, I think that's the rural bus stop.
Okay, it's the rural transit. And
But I do notice that some of the people who are waiting at the bus stop will go over to the hall and wait there just because they don't want it crowd.
okay, and Chair, if it's all right, if I have one more quick question, it's just
Yes.
okay, thank you. It's just have there already been a number of volunteer hours placed into this project?
Well, this project is electrical and, you know, a lot of us are not equipped to deal with that. So any volunteer hours will be clean up and, you know, that's that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Any further questions? And I'd just like to say I'm a community halls are very important. I'm a big fan of them. I was formerly the president of the Skeety Community Association managing our hall. So it's very important to make sure halls have the systems in place so that people can use them regularly. A well-used hall is central. So I thank you for your presentation. We'll be discussing this later in the agenda along with the other applications.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Okay, our next, our fifth delegation is from Trina Isakson from Powell River Community Foundation. Vital signs.
Hello, welcome everyone. I'm a volunteer an outgoing board member with the Community Foundation. I was hoping that our chair or vice chair could come in my stead, given my working relationship with some of the directors here, but it was not possible. And I believe the staff recommendations are specific to areas A through D and not anyways. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. So Vital Signs is a tool, it's a research project that pulls together statistics and research on community well-being. The main overarching organizer is the Community Foundation of Canada, of which we are a member. And it's meant to help community groups and government with funding applications, help them have the statistics at their hand to be able to advocate for that funding, and also for them to help make policy and program decisions. Early planning for Vital Signs started almost 18 months ago. I invited a number of community leaders and individuals, or including elected officials. I believe Director McCormick was at that. It was like a year and a half ago, so maybe I don't remember. And I think at that time, Director Leishman attended as well. Maybe Director Dowd, I'm not sure. Anyways, it was a while ago. As the volunteer leader on the board, I've had different pulls on my time, and so it's taken a little bit longer than I hoped, but one of the benefits of waiting a little bit longer is we can incorporate the 2021 census data that came out throughout this year. We're working with contracted researchers to pull together the existing stats and research, and also they conducted a community survey over the summer, and we're near the end of the work. We're just doing some final reviews and moving on to the report graphic design. Hope to launch in December, but the researcher's on holidays for a bit, and so it might have to shift to January. I'm just in the last throes of trying to coordinate a launch event venue and catering and all of those things. So there will be likely a launch breakfast where the printed program is available with invitations of sponsors and community leaders who've supported the work. We've had some great community support from local organizations and businesses as sponsors so that this project doesn't impact our abilities to provide grants to the community. This sponsorship that we're seeking covers project funding only and is not distributed to grantees. It's specific to this project. So the request is for $2,000, which would put the regional district at a gold sponsorship level. Other gold sponsors include the City of Powell River, Community Futures, First Credit Union, and Fleming and Associates. We also have some other donors who are contributing $1,000, including Lyft, School District 47, Missoula Motors, and River City Mini Excavating. And then a number of those who are donating smaller amounts. And so our total budget's $19,700. There's a bit of flexibility and uncertainty there regarding the number of reports that we print and the scale of our launch event and promotion. And so depending on your decision today, we have a little bit of wiggle room there if we have to. And I also want to take this opportunity to share with you all, as well as the other folks in the room. I just got an email. This is not related to this Vital Signs project, but I did get an email earlier today that Community Foundations of Canada recently signed an MOU with the federal government, distributing money through community foundations in a community services recovery fund. And it looks like our region is expected to get over $150,000 for distribution throughout the granting region of the Community Foundation, which covers all of your areas except for Lasqueti Island, which is covered by the Parksville Qualicum Community Foundation. And so I am now available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions from directors? Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I just heard you tell me there's $150,000 coming to our region. Is there like criteria for distributing those grants, and what would what would eligible projects be for that?
So I don't know. It's the MOU hasn't between us and the Community Foundations of Canada hasn't been signed yet, but it will include both what are called qualified donees, which are registered charities, but there's also a chunk of money that will be available to non-qualified donees. So often community foundations can't donate to a nonprofit society or other unincorporated community group. And it looks like we will have a chunk of money that's available for that purpose. But I don't know the specifics. We just got a general, hey, FYI, we still need to do some calculations, but it looks like this might be coming your way, but we'll need to sign an MOU to finalize things.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'll thank you for your presentation, Ms. Isakson, and we'll discuss this a bit later in the agenda. Next up, we have Annie Sims and Naomi Harrison, qathet Art Council.
Hello, everybody. My name is Annie Sims. I first would just like to thank everyone for having us tonight here at this meeting place, taking place on the traditional and beautiful lands of the Kawana Nation. Yeah, I've been a part of the Art Council for 2 years now as the youth program lead. I'm first pleased to introduce you to some of the current qathet art and culture activities. Please see the most recent studio tour brochure with a map of many amazing artists, galleries, art and cultural centers, and arts collectives beautifying the area. Also, we have attached a collection of letters in support for funding. The qathet Art Council provides services in many ways, including hosting annual festivals and events such as National Day of Truth and Reconciliation Walk, Samantha Festival, Art of the True Self Youth Festival, and the qathet Studio Tour. The organization also operates the qathet Art Center and programs national and provincial exhibitions, performances, youth classes, camps, workshops, artist talks, and community gatherings year-round. Our community partners are vast, and currently we are piloting art in the library and VIU. We also support community arts and culture groups through mentorship, advocacy, letters, and support to professional and emerging artists. We are deeply committed to arts and culture in the qathet region and are seeking funding from the qathet Regional District to support our essential youth programs starting in January 2023 that include weekly after-school art programs, Art Raven Family, and the Art Raven Family Outdoor Program that go on from January to June. In March, we do a spring break camp for an art spring break camp, and June 1st to 30th, there will be the LGBTQ2S and Allies Youth Art Festival and Exhibition. And throughout the summer, we also provide summer art camps. So the importance of art and culture, I mean, I have personally gotten to witness how the programs are so impactful on the young community here. And I mean, art engages young minds, explores creative solutions, and provides social and creative connection. A little bit about my experience, I suppose, is I came here just on my bicycle, not really planning on staying, and ended up going to the qathet Art Center to see a queer exhibition. And while I was there, I met Karen and, had a little bit of experience working as an art teacher at a daycare previously in the city, and sort of discussed with her earnestly the qualms that I had with the ethos of the previous organization I worked for, and sort of just wanting to create programming that really supports create programming with a community focus instead of this sort of elitist fine art type approach that I was previously a part of. And and I just the support that I received in providing mentorship and guidance in becoming a teacher and learning those skills has been absolutely amazing. And the way that I kind of perceive the art center is it's just a satellite for so much community connection, and it's such a hub. And I mean, I get to, just from being there, get to learn so much on a regular basis from all the different types of people that walk through the door, and getting to be there with the kids. It's an incredibly inspiring space because it's not just a gallery. It is definitely a hub for just discourse of what's happening in our community. And the kids get to be exposed to that, which I think is really impactful and cool. And just, I guess, the opportunity to be a youth instructor and working with other youth and sort of creating this opportunity to show these young people you can be an artist, you can be a teacher, these things are possible for you too. And just the intergenerational nurturing and mentorship I've received has just been beyond anything that I could, you know, ever like conceive in my imagination. So I'm really grateful to be a part of this space, and really grateful for our community. So I'm going to pass it to Naomi now.
Okay, hello, my name's Naomi Harrison. I'm in grade 12 at Brooks Secondary. I'm also the co-facilitator of Brooks GSA, which is the Gender and Sexuality Alliance. So the Brooks GSA paired up with the Art Center in June 2022, and we had our first youth festival and exhibition. We received sponsorship from SD47 and over 36 businesses and organizations. So we were able to directly support youth in the region through all that funding, which was amazing. And we'd really like to be able to hold another similar festival in this June 1st to 30th, 2023, which would be the LGBTQ2S+ Allies Youth Art Festival and Exhibition. So we'd like to start pre-production of that in January 2023. I've gained so much experience working at the Art Center with youth and just experience working in a gallery in general. The Art Center in itself is super impactful to youth in this region. Like it gives a great place for just people to be themselves and from any background to just have freedom of expression. It's also the only place I'd say right now that has a place for youth to be supported in like a show and for all the public to access and be able to go see. It's provided me with essential work experience that I don't think I would have been able to get anywhere else, especially because I'm very interested in pursuing art and maybe working in a gallery in the future. So I really think that supporting the Art Center is worthwhile, because without it, I think that myself, as well as so many other youth right now, would just have one less crucial outlet to make connections and just express themselves, but also just get inspired. So yeah.
Thank you both for coming before us and for your presentations. I see Director Elliott's got her hand up. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. First, I want to say it warms my heart to have our youth come and present to us. Your stories are amazing. I'm extremely proud to be part of a community that can support this kind of thing. You talked a little bit about reports and letters and things, and I didn't see it attached to the agenda. So my first question is, do you get those? Okay. We have those? Do we have them already, or they're coming?
They were part of the package.
Oh, is it down further on the agenda? Oh, gotcha. And just a couple questions that I have are, can you comment on the amalgamation of the Malaspina Art Society into the qathet art? Has that happened? Is it underway? Is it?
Sorry, through the chair, Karen Kamen, the president of the Arts Council. We're still in process with that, and the AGM of the Art Council is in February, and the AGM of Malaspina Art Society is in March. So we're hoping to go completely through that process by then.
Thank you. I have a follow-up if I may.
Okay, yes.
So also, I know because I've attended some of the meetings, not all of them, but some of them. There is a significant amount of work you do at the Art Center where you're a contact for people looking to connect to commercial film resources and other arts style stuff. And it affects, and it's part of our economic development for the entire region. Could you comment on that, please?
Yes, since we put in the application, we're actually receiving a lot more requests from the community. We had one person last week reach out for window painting for the holiday season. So I've been really happy to make a recommendation.
So, and we've also had a lot of, like in the beginning, we had families reach out to us, parents looking for classes, then parents asking for camps. So we started with a spring break and then we added the summer. For 2 years in a row now, we've been asked for a winter break camp. So we're actually going to launch one because the way the holiday schedule is, there may be parents that have to go back to work after the New Year's, and then there's still another week of holiday season. So we're looking at adding some new programming for that time of year. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the board? Okay, with that, I don't see anyone. Thank you for coming before us. I'm really happy. I think all the board is happy to see young people come to us and speak to us and do a lot of good work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, 5.7, I believe, is John Hewson, Qathet Pride Society.
The old fashioned way with that. Hand out for you. I know not again, John. I know again. Excellent. What? I don't know. I might be thinking on there. Oh, that's it. There we go. Michelle? Well, firstly, thank you very much for allowing us to present, but also for considering our grant application. I'd like to congratulate you all on your either election or re-election to the board and the committee here. And also just to acknowledge that I think we live in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and we're so fortunate to be here with the Klahaman Nation and the Coast Salish people to learn from that history. I think community is a big part of that history, and I think Pride is a lot more than a parade. I think Pride was born out of the Stonewall riots 50 odd years ago, where drag queens had to stand up to being bullied and tortured and many injustices against human beings. I think here we're very fortunate to have a relatively open and welcoming community. Pride has been around, but Qathet Pride, formerly Rose Pride, has been around now for 10 years. Many volunteers have put in many hours. And I think last year, coming out of COVID, the board made a decision not to go ahead with Pride in the Park, which has been sort of the signature event each year because of large gatherings, going with smaller events. And we experimented with 14 events. We brought up one drag queen from Vancouver as a main talent, and we saw over 300 people attending those 14 events spread out over 2 weeks. This year, we followed suit, adding back in the Pride in the Park. We had a total of 13 events and saw over 700 participants this year. All of this is done on the back of volunteers. We are burning people out. We are losing good people. We ask an awful lot of a few. And I think our bigger picture ask is to consider a partnership between the region, the city, the nation, key sponsors, actually recognize that Pride is, or Qathet Pride's mission of taking care of community. Maybe as much as 10% of the community is on the LGBTQ spectrum. My sense here in Qathet is it might even be a little bit higher. I think we're quite a fluid community. I think we're loving people, and I think there's a lot more openness. There is also some pushback. There is some aggression towards people, and I think the biggest issue people on the LGBTQIA2S+ equation experience some fear and trepidation in coming out and being themselves. So the Pride Society sees itself, the board sees themselves as providing a service to the community that is greater than just a weekend celebration in the park. Expanding out to these 14 events, we see that they're well attended, people appreciate them, and at those events, the participants are saying we want more. We want year-round services. So our ask this year was quite aggressive. We went above and beyond what we knew would be provided, I think really in the hope that we would open a dialogue between the different bodies within the region. And so you're the first that we're presenting to. We did not have ourselves organized sufficiently to apply for the first round of funding, which meant we also missed the city round in funding. You'll see on one side of the page here, it says our requests of the QRD. there are 5 bullets. We requested everything from covering a shortfall this year. We had 2 young ladies stand up to produce the events this year. They agreed to do it without pay. So this request to cover the shortfall would actually mean that we would be able to pay those people for the work that they did. And they worked hard for that relatively small amount of money. I believe that is the recommendation of staff, is to cover that amount. I'm going to be cheeky because I see that within what's coming later in your agenda that you're approving amounts, and ours is one of the larger amounts being recommended for approval. But for us to move forward, to consider getting ahead of the curve next year, we believe as a board that it is worth investing some money in having a community engagement and a mini strategic plan, like creating a vision. What are we really doing? Are we doing more than just a weekend? Are we doing a week-long event? Are we going to try and cater to this community year-round so that it is normal? There are programs out there. There's the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce have a rainbow registered program, which is a sticker a business can put on their door that says you are a safe space for LGBTQ folk. That means that it's safe for everybody for the most part. So just recognize as a business that having the understanding of some of the rainbow alphabet, some of the trans conversation, it's a big conversation. It can be complex and confusing for people, but to recognize people as they wish to be recognized is the greatest gift you can give them. Not being recognized as the way in which you wish to be recognized can be an insult. It can be a barrier to entry, and it can be a cause for people to withdraw and feel isolated. Isolation can lead to mental health and even suicide. And the LGBT community suffers from this in a large way. So really our ask, and being a little bit more aggressive than we know is reasonable, is really to bring this to both this committee, the regional district, as well as the city and other key partners. There is a lot of sympathy. We've had incredible support over the last few years. We've had incredibly generous support, both financially and in kind. The volunteers give a lot. Local businesses have given many prizes for us to give at the events. Venues have been provided free of charge. The newspapers have written us checks to share some of their advertising revenue because they've had Pride special editions. If you were able to consider the additional $3,000 for planning and the additional $3,000 to enable us to plan ahead for next year, that will enable us to be better organized and to actually produce Pride without killing people off in the process of delivering it. And it might also enable us to set up databases that allow us to communicate more effectively. Ultimately, our ask, I think, is to create a staff position. And I think for the Pride needs, we need a half-time, part-time person. I think the question we put out to the community, is there another nonprofit that needs a staff person part-time where it could be a shared resource? Does that fit into an existing organization? Is it an existing business that has that capacity to offer that resource? There are many ways we can solve this problem, as it were, but if we can resolve the problem, we can deliver some consistent services, we can better understand the needs of the community, and we can enjoy celebration year-round, every day, and in creating safe spaces. In creating safe spaces for the community, we make ourselves more welcoming also as a tourist destination. So there's an opportunity to be more welcoming for those who are living. On the other side of the page, it's worth noticing that under the recent statistics, halfway down there, it says the Canada Action Plan. Canada has just recently created an LGBTQ action plan for $100 million over 5 years. There may be opportunities, maybe with staff help, maybe if our board was able to focus on these kinds of opportunities rather than the delivery of the Pride events, there may be grants and funds that are applicable for this region for us to actually set up a more formal and dependable structure to serve the LGBT community, which I think in turn serves the whole community. I think from our experience in the events that we have held, as much as we see the LGBTQ community, there are the allies and friends of that community who attend as well. I'm not going to read through the document you have. I think there were other papers provided. I'm not sure if they all made it to your package when we provided our application, but we are a completely volunteer-run organization, and I think for us to be effective, and I think our board is in agreement that becoming an established organization would definitely help the community. You have any questions or?
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. And I just like to say, you know, safe spaces need to be space every day of the year. So I really appreciate your words. I will open it up to the board for questions. Do I see any hands raised? Anyone? So we're going to be discussing, oh, I see Director Elliott. Thank you.
More a comment than anything. I appreciate you coming here. I definitely support inclusion and safe communities. And so I know that's what you're about, and I am supportive of, and I wanted to thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming before us. And you can either stick around to see what gets discussed later, or you can look at the
You've got time. Thank you.
Or you can watch the video later on.
Maybe that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, 5.8 is a delegation from Jane Waterman, Vananda Improvement District.
Thank you, Chair.
Hello, I'm Jane Waterman. This is Neil Berger. We're both current trustees of the Vananda Improvement District. And this afternoon, Jane will be making our presentation. Also in the room is Sandra Hazard, our administrator, and Heidi Surichta, our administrative assistant. So we're here to support our request for a grant in aid for Texada Rescue, road rescue. I'll give you a brief history of the rescue funding. In 1994, the Texada Island Emergency Programs Extended Service established for the purpose of providing emergency programs for Electoral D of the regional district. The service initially provided emergency planning and preparedness measures, as well as providing the island's only road rescue vehicle extrication service. And we got 1,500 a year. In 1995, it was increased to 7,000. 2014, it was increased to 15,000. In 2014, QRD converted the EPES to a local contribution service to support the delivery of a road rescue service on Texada, and donated the rescue capital assets to Vananda Improvement District. The 2014 change clarified that the road rescue service is delivered by the Vananda Fire Department while maintaining the same requisition amount and equitable sharing of the service. In 2021, they'd request for increased funding. We were up to 15,000 and stayed there from 2014. And we felt that we needed at least a cost of living increase, but the bylaw was a maximum of 15,000. And by asking for an increase for our funding, it generated the regional district to do some legal exploration that cost $9,000, which came out of the 15,000 that we would normally receive, and left us with a large shortfall. So instead of 13,400, which would have been less administration costs, we got 4,196. QRD suggested we apply for a grant in aid to recoup the funds. We had not previously separated out rescue costs from the fire department, so our accounting history is inaccurate. And to determine that we wanted an increase, it became apparent that the fire department had been subsidizing rescue. And we have now defined how to split the costs. Previous financial statements do not reflect the actual cost. We've made the improvements, and we are going forward. We feel we have a very good accounting between rescue and the fire department. It was mentioned that we have 6,900 surplus, but this is in a capital reserve. It needs to be in a capital reserve. The truck is aged and it needs replacing. Also, again, the fire department has subsidized the Venanda ratepayers, and the Venanda Fire Department have subsidized Texada Rescue by paying any extra costs out of the fire department budget. For example, we received an extrication tools and training grant, but it did not cover 100% of the costs, and remaining came from the fire account. We very much appreciate the assistance that QRD staff have given us to apply for reimbursement for rescue call-outs. At present, we do not know the status of these requests. We are hoping to get $4,004 reimbursed for 2022. Just a minute, I've just got to find the last point I want to make. I've got it here. Yeah, so our finances are the QRD contribution this year, 4,196. The reimbursement expected for 4,000, so that's 8,200, whereas our expenses and our budget is 16,480. The accounting is we can account for specific things like vehicle insurance and maintenance, truck maintenance and that sort of thing directly, but it is a shared facility with our fire department. So some of our costs, we've worked out an allocation of what should be rescue and what should be our fire department. And we feel very confident that going forward, we have that in good order. The legal opinion that was sought by the regional district and deducted from our rescue funds in the tune of 9,000, we have not seen a copy of that and don't know what is involved in what you needed to spend that money on. So we are asking for a grant in aid to make up the difference in our funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Waterman. Are there questions from, I see Director McCormick?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for your presentation, Jane and Neil and Sandra. Jane, as a former bank manager, I imagine you're fairly familiar with budgeting and you're involved with the Venanda Improvement District budgeting. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so typically, do you start with the zero-based budget where you build from the ground up the way we sort of do here, and if that's what you do, then I see they're recommending putting reserves forward rather than putting them in I mean a surplus forward rather than putting it in reserve. Is that typical?
No, we will put that 6,900 into reserve. For it is in reserve to replace the truck and any other capital expenses we will have.
So normally reserves or surpluses that are then rolled into capital reserve for extrication tools or truck replacement or that kind of thing. Is that?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And I noticed that this year staff are saying that you've got $6,900 of surplus, and were you expecting that to go into a reserve?
Yes, it is in a reserve. It's in a reserve in a term deposit for the Texada Rescue Capital Reserve.
So by moving it forward then to next year's budget, then you would not have that money go into reserve for asset management?
No, we're not. We don't want to use that money. So our budget for next year, $16,000, does not take into account anything. Can't take into account that 6,900. We need. Our truck is old, and it just needs it. We must be diligent in saving to replace for it.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? I see Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I have a question about I don't know if this is for the delegation or for possibly the corporate officer, but the agreement that the QRD has with Vancouver, Van Anda Improvement District to give them $15,000 a year, is part of that supposed to be earmarked for reserves, or is it for operating expenses exclusively? I don't know.
I don't know who can answer that, corporate officer, or maybe.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would direct us to the manager of emergency services. Running.
Okay, I see Mr. Tom's on the, over to you.
Yeah, good evening. If I may, through the chair, the agreement doesn't get into that type of specifics. It really says that it's looking to assist Van Anda in the road rescue service.
Thank you. Mr. Tom, are there further questions? Seeing none, I'll thank you for your delegation. We'll discuss this item later in the agenda, and thank you for coming for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we are moving on to number 6, unfinished business. There is nothing right now. Correspondence. We have received one item of correspondence, and it has no specific motions attached. Does anyone have any business arising from this correspondence? Seeing none, we have received it. Item 8, business arising from correspondence. There is none. Item 9.1.
Order, Chair.
Oh, yes.
Chair, can I?
Yeah, Director Gisborne.
Sorry, before we jump into the reports, we've been doing this for about an hour and a half. I have to use the washroom. Could we take a quick 5-minute break?
Yes, I believe. Is everyone okay with a 5-minute break and resume at 5:35?
That way we're fresh for the reports.
Okay, let's take a break for 5 minutes. whenever everyone's ready.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We're back in session.
Okay, thank you. We will proceed fresh, hopefully. So item 9.1 is next up on the agenda, Myrtle Pond Water Service Capital Inclusion Charge. And we have two separate recommended motions. So would the board like to consider? So Director Gisborne?
I'll move the first recommendation.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Okay, I see a seconder, Director Brownberg. Okay, discussion on the item 1. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, the second item, does someone want to make that recommendation? Director Gisborne?
I'll move the recommendation with option number 1 in the report presented on November 16th.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne, for filling in, and Director Brander seconded. Okay, discussion on the item. Director Gisborne?
Thank you, Chair. Let me just make sure I have my notes. Yeah, I see that this is an interesting item of business in relation to the Myrtle Pond water system. I'm proposing to move item option number 1. It has a higher year-over-year inflation rate. One of the questions I have, and I think would be best for Linda, is we are seeing, I think, something like 6.8% inflation last month. The Vancouver index that I think that we're using for this proposed bylaw is looking at around 4.4% each year. If we do see inflation above these values, that would be in this proposed draft 1, or sorry, in this proposed bylaw. In the future, would it possibly make more sense to have like maybe a policy in there that if inflation is above what's in the bylaw, that the board could possibly amend it? So it'd kind of be like having a policy that includes a bit of option 3, which is in the staff report. Is that something that? So.
Okay, our manager of financial services is here. I'll pass the question to her.
Thank you, Chair. I think that because it's a bylaw, the policy couldn't override the bylaw, so we could have a practice that says that, you know, if the inflation is increasing quicker than what we think, then we could bring it back to the board to do an amendment to the bylaw. But the corporate officer might want to correct me if I'm incorrect with that. So I would think rather than a policy, maybe just a practice that, you know, if we do notice that the inflation is increasing faster, that we then bring the bylaw back to the board for an amendment.
Corporate officer, did you have any comments?
Thank you, Chair. No, that is exactly what I would recommend doing.
Okay, thank you. Director, is there anyone else who has a question first? Seeing none, Director Gisborne, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. And that's where I'm thinking about, if we go forward and adopt this bylaw, it might be prudent, and I'd type something up here. We could potentially put a line in the bylaw that would state something along the lines that if the inflation is above what is in the bylaw, the board may amend the bylaw to increase the inclusion charge per unit based on the non-residential construction index for Vancouver. Because one of the items pointed out in the staff report is we want to make sure we can give clarity to the public who may be looking at joining the Myrtle Pond water system, and they're kind of getting an impression of, well, if I join it 4 years from now, you know, I'm expecting that I'll be paying, you know, $32,000, but we might see significant inflation, and then 4 years later, well, the bylaw has been amended. So I'm just wondering, maybe that's something to consider, of just having a line in the bylaw to let the public know that, you know, this is the rate that is set by this bylaw, but if the inflation goes above it, the board may increase the bylaw. And that's my comments on that. And then the second thing that I wanted to have a little bit of clarification on is when we're looking at the Marist Road Centennial Drive Water Improvement District, if they wanted to join the Myrtle Pond water system, I could see them joining all as one large block because they're already on a water system. Traff Road is a different story. There's multiple properties with their own systems. So if we were to move forward and put a water line in along Centennial Drive, we would expect that all those properties would be joining up as a group. But if we're looking down at Traff Road, would we be looking at potentially be putting in a water line? But how do we know how many properties would actually want to join? Like maybe we put the line down there and only a handful decide to join and the rest say no thank you. So I'm just curious about that potential issue and solution. And I'm not sure if that's a question for our manager of operational services or.
I'll refer that first to our corporate officer, and she may help us with who could answer the question.
Thank you. I think I would direct that to the manager of financial services.
Okay, Ms.
Manager
Greenan.
of operational services. Ask her.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think that would be best directed to the manager of operational services or possibly to Kerwood Lydell's engineer, who is also in the meeting today, Colwyn Sunderland. But I'll first like to direct it, please, to Patrick Devereaux, our manager of operational services.
Okay, over to you, Mr. Devereaux.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. We discussed this possibility when reviewing this long time back when we were doing the capacity study. I think we'd have to reach out for community engagement and have a number of folks sign on, but I prefer if Colin gave us the accurate answer up to date. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Sunderland.
Yes,
your turn.
Thank you, Chair Fall and Linda and Patrick. From my perspective, I think that what would typically be done in a case like this is that each of these sub areas that would be potentially an extension of service and included in the Myrtle Pond Water Service area would go through some kind of an electoral assent process, usually either a referendum or petition. And the question on the referendum or petition would be for all of the properties to be included in the service, and then they would be subject to the taxes and fees as prescribed for the service from that point forward. So there would be an interest in connecting to the water service because you're paying for it anyway, or at least for some portion of it. And then in going through that process, if more, for example, of the community members in one of those sub areas has their own water supply and they're happy with their own water supply, then a petition or referendum might be likely to fail. But if a majority is in a situation where they would see an immediate benefit from participating in the service, then the referendum or petition would likely pass, and the project would go ahead. There is a way that often with these extensions of service for servicing development, somebody who's not ready to connect to the service right away, even if they're included in the service area, you could potentially set up a latecomer arrangement, which would enable some participants or some of the community members not to participate right away. So you draw the service area boundary around them, give them the opportunity to participate in the service at some point in the future by paying their inclusion charge later. That's kind of messy and complicated. My suggestion would be to look at including these areas sort of in the two blocks that are shown on the maps in the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any other directors who would like to ask questions? I have a question that's possibly, it's kind of a follow-up on an earlier one, and I'll try to phrase it this way. So I understand from the report that I support option one, and that if the projected inflation rates are higher or possibly lower, really deviate from what's in the bylaw, that the board can amend the bylaw at any time. So anytime we see a big enough deviation to warrant a change, not just because it's up by 1% or down, but really big differences maybe. So I guess the question I have is possibly for our manager of financial services, do we need to put language in the bylaw for that? Or is it sufficient that we have that authority and that we would, that this would be assessed and monitored over time? And if it's detected that there's a deviation, that this would come before the board? Yes, Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have never seen a sentence like that I can recall in a bylaw. So the way I understand it is that it would just be, the board always has that option to amend the bylaw when it feels it needs to. I don't think that we need to add a line giving the board that authority.
Okay, thank you. That's my understanding too. And I think given that this would apply to all of our bylaws, the same authority, we want to be consistent. Okay, any further discussion by the board? I see none, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none, it's carried. Okay, so that leads us on to item 9.2, and we've got a number of grant and aid financial assistance requests, 11 of them, and they're all separate, so we'll take them one at a time. And the first one relates to Myrtle Pond Golf Club. Does anyone wish to make a motion? Dr. Gisborne?
I'll move the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, do we see a seconder for that?
Second.
Okay, Director Brander, do we have any discussion? Anyone want to? Okay, Director Gisborne?
Yes, I'd just like to say that while I do support the Myrtle Pond Golf Club, I see that it provides a benefit to the greater region. I've seen this item come up over and over in a variety of different manners. And one of the challenges that we've had in the past with, say, the tax exemption is that can unfairly burden some of the rural services, such as the fire protection. And when we're looking at a grant and aid request, I've seen it come forward as, something just from the electoral areas. And myself, I would prefer to see financial support for the Myrtle Point Golf Club to be more of a regional benefit, because I see it as benefiting both the electoral areas and the city, not Lasqueti generally, because I think that's a bit of a long way for Lasqueti golfers to travel. And I'm not entirely sure how many Texas Islanders will head on over. But I do see it as a benefit, and I think we should discuss it in more detail in the financial assistant intake in 2023. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. Is there anyone else wish to discuss? Okay, seeing none, I will then call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 9.2.2 is for the grant and aid request from Powell River Community Foundation with funding. The recommendation is for funding from various amounts from areas A, B, C, and D. Does someone want to make a motion? Director Brander?
Thanks, Chair. I think I'd actually like to make an alternate motion that would essentially put all of those numbers, cut them in half.
So then the total amount would then be $1,000?
$1,000, yeah.
Is that correct? Is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, Director Gisborne. Corporate officers, is the motion clear?
Yes, thank you. We will have to work out the numbers, but the motion is clear. The intent of the amendment is clear.
Okay, thank you. So discussion on the motion put forward. That's Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. My thought behind moving an alternate motion is that the city of Powell River is being asked for $2,000. They have essentially twice the population of the electoral areas A, B, C, and D. So I thought $1,000 was a reasonable amount.
Okay, is there any other directors wish to say anything on this? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. That's for $1,000 for the community foundation. Okay, item 9.2.3 is financial request from qathet Art with the recommendation to consider that request during financial assistant intake 1 in 2023. Does the director want to make a motion in relation to qathet Art's request?
I don't have a question before any motion gets done.
Okay,
So
if no one's going to make a motion, I'll recognize Director Elliott for a
Thanks.
process question. Oh, did you have a question, Director Elliott?
The motion that is recommended talks about considering it in intake for 2023, so that essentially puts considering it for this intake off the table. Is that correct?
Thank you.
So maybe our manager of financial services can answer. What happens when we put forward a consideration, and what are the options for considering requests in 2023 financial plan?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to actually direct these questions to Jason Cowenhoven, the Assistant Manager of Financial Services, as he authored the report.
Thank you.
Mr. Cowenhoven, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, the intent behind these motions to move these requests into intake 1 of 2023 is to follow the intake timeline that's in our financial assistance policy. We currently define 2 intakes during the year, and those are the times where we took a wholesome look at all of the applications and all the limitations on our funding, and try to make a decision for that group, for that entire intake. So if this was pushed forward to intake 1 of 2023, then that would mean this request would just come forward into that next group. Alternatively, the board could choose to consider this request now and approve this request now using 2022 funds. There are funds still available in our financial assistance budgets. You could also choose to approve this request now and fund it in 2023. So you could do that in early January, which would line up with this specific initiative's project timeline. Those would be outside of our policy, and that's why those were not recommended, but those would be the alternatives available.
Okay, thank you. And maybe just to clarify one item there. So so the board knows, if there's appetite to provide assistance to qathet Art, option 1 is to take the recommendation, which would be to consider it when we look at intake 1 next year. Another would be to recommend to support qathet Art right now with 2023 funds, and a third would be to support qathet Art with 2023 funds, in which case the funding would not become available till January at the earliest. And the one question I have for clarification is, if we take the recommendation, would it automatically show up on our agenda? Does qathet Art have to do anything further, or would this application automatically show up in that intake 1 consideration? Mr. Cowenhoven?
Thank you, through the Chair. We don't want to make this a burden on these groups, so I would suggest that we just bring this application as is automatically into intake 1.
Yes, and I agree. I think when we do a consideration, that would be my preference. Okay, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I was gapping a little bit back there. I'd be happy to recommend the motion in front of us.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion? Okay, Director Lennox. Okay, is there discussion on the recommendation? So this would we would see the same request in the agenda when we consider financial grants and aid requests in 2023. Director Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. So if I understood what was presented was that's one option, and then the other option is we can consider from 2022 budget. Did I hear that?
Yes, thank you.
And also 2023, whereas
yes.
This option means just considering it in the 2023 budget. I believe that the qathet art is looking to do an annual request of the QRD. I'm extremely supportive of qathet art. They've been working extremely hard to grow an organization that supports the entire region. So I am in favor, I think, of considering some from this year's budget and considering from next year's budget, if that opportunity exists. Now, I heard it was outside policy, which I don't quite understand, but that's what I would like to see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Elliott. And I'll clarify on the policy item in a moment, if I may, but Director Doubt had his hand up.
Yeah, I do. And I'm trying to understand all of the things that are being said. I would just as soon approve a grant. Staff has told us that funds are available in the 2022 grant intake. This is the second intake. I think we put these applications off from the spring intake to the fall intake. I'm not sure why, if funds are available and we want to make a donation, we would want to reconsider it again sometime next spring. I think, you know, if that art has convinced me that there's a useful reason to provide them with a grant, if there's money available, I'd like to see it spent this year. And I don't really understand the concept of approving it now and paying it out of next year's funds. That's a bit of a complicated solution for me. But I guess we have a motion on the table. I'd like to defeat it and actually approve.
Okay, thank you. So that's the motion before us is what was made. And if we wish to do these items that have been raised to fund them now, we need to defeat this one or withdraw it and then make a different motion. Director Brander?
Thanks, Chair. My reasoning for wanting to push this forward to 2023 is twofold. One, the staff report includes the comment that the youth art programs are scheduled for 2023, so we can still fund them in the upcoming round, in the first round of 2023. The other aspect of it is I'm concerned about my grant and aid funding for Area C, that by including this, it will be depleted to a point where I can't fund something else that's coming up later on in the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Director Brander. Director Gisborne?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo the comments made by Director Brander. We have had a number of individuals and organizations that have put in grant requests, some of them early and some of them very time sensitive. I'm seeing the outdoor lights at Lang Bay Hall, as well as a few others on our list. My concern is that if we pass a motion right now to provide funding for the qathet art, that could deplete those grant and aids and potentially limit our ability to provide the funding to those other organizations. So I'm wondering if it actually might be better to table consideration of funding for the qathet art until after we get through the list of the other organizations that are asking for funding, and then we can see what's left over. Would that be something that might be in order to?
It would be in order if the motion was made. So, are you making that motion, Director Gisborne, or do we continue discussion?
I think a motion to table is not discussable, and I saw Director Elliott put her hand up, so I will not make the motion at this time.
Okay, Director Elliott?
I'm not opposed to tabling the motion until later on in the agenda but I'm in favor of defeating it at this point and considering some funding for 2022, because I believe intake for 2023 would be a separate application, and we are essentially denying 2022 support of qathet art, which I don't like that idea. qathet art also needs to apply for grants outside of the community, and one of the things they use to leverage funding from gaming grants and other places like the BC Arts is demonstrated support from the community. And we are essentially denying the qathet art council of support from qathet art by pushing it into next year, and I object to that strongly. So
Okay, so Director Gisborne.
I'll move to table this item until we get to the end of the list of our financial assistance requests.
So until after item 9.2.11.
Yeah, number 11 on mine.
Yeah. Okay, is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, so I don't believe it's debatable. So is there I'll just call the question on the tabling. So all in favor, tabling? Opposed? None carried. Okay, so we'll put that off for now and go on to the next item, which is a request from qathet Old Growth for the for their request for their event with funding from areas A, B, C, and D. Would someone like to make a motion regarding that request? Director Dowd? Or is that Director Brander? Sorry.
I'll actually move an alternate motion that the board not approve of grants and respectfully deny qathet Old Growth.
Okay, second by Director Gisborne. Is there any discussion on that? Director Brander?
Thank you, Chair. I have a problem funding this event, not because of personal reasons, but because I find there's a real political nature behind it all, and it's kind of a hot topic in the community. I think these kind of events should be better funded by private sources than taxpayer dollars.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on this? Director Gisborne?
Thank you, Chair. Let me just bring up my notes. As I read through the documents and hearing the presentation, I believe I wrote it down. I think it was $25,000, which I thought was for one of the day's events. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like $25,000 for the cost of one day event and $34,000 cost for the other day's event. And reading their proposal, they have a capacity of 400 people for each day's event. And to me, that's a significant amount of money. And maybe those 400 people get an incredible benefit out of it. But I also share Director Brander's concerns that this is fairly political. It doesn't really have like a grand open door where anyone and everyone can just come in and fill the place and get experience from it. And that's why, we at the board have to prioritize where our money is going, because we only have so much money available in our grant and aid, hence why we tabled the last motion. And therefore I'm in favor of denying it this time. Maybe after we see the results of the event, then next year we can take a look again. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Director Brander, is there anyone else who hasn't spoken yet that wishes to speak before I?
Director Elliott.
Oh, Director Elliott. Sorry, I can't see you yet. Director Elliott? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Brander, for pointing that out. With all due respect, we're marching forward in a time where climate change is impacting things more than ever before. And to say that that's political is, I don't know, everything we support is a little bit political, I suppose. And it's stating the obvious, but I think that reducing the amount of support would be better than saying we don't support the idea of people gathering to talk about the changes in our environment. Maybe we don't support it to the amount that they've asked, but I think that it's regionally affecting everybody. And there is avenues for people to the entire region to participate in this event. So I respectfully disagree. So I think some level of support would be my way of thinking.
Okay, thank you, Director Elliott. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. There's a few comments I meant to make my first time around, and I slipped my mind, I guess. But as I mentioned, I find it to be very politically motivated. And even if you look in their application, their self-stated target audience includes, quote, decision makers who can influence forest management policy. And this board, we usually are giving out money for such things as community events or groups, you know, pride celebration that we were talking about earlier, cultural events, food banks. And there's a large portion of the community that makes their living off of the forestry industry. Now, I'm not leaning one way or the other on this, and I'm just saying that there definitely is a disagreement on this issue in the community. And I think for the local government to come down on one side of it versus the other side could open up a can of worms. So it's not about how much money we're giving to the thing. I think it'd be better off if we just step back from this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item? Any other director wish to speak? Director Gisborne, for your second time, yes?
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, this will be my second time and my last. I'm hearing both sides of this. Yes, it's political, but then again, there's a lot of things that we support that are very political. The impact it has on individuals in the community that make a livelihood off of, you know, logging and harvested timber. Well, I have a little sawmill on my farm, so I know that experience. To me, the big hurdle for myself is the amount, not just the amount in their budget, but also in the amount that we're being asked to give, especially on like this is the first time around. I'm hearing from Director Elliott a potential reduction. And I'm wondering if Director Elliott has any ideas on how much, maybe quarter of the amount. I'm just curious if there is a reduced amount. I would be happy with going with a quarter or 25% of what is being asked. I think that's a little bit more in line, and then we'll kind of see how it plays out, because I think this is their first year. And, you know, sometimes when an organization gets started, maybe they don't have the right lingo down, or they're kind of building the plane as they fly it. And then after the event is done, we can actually see if, you know, maybe it was a success for us to support, or maybe it is something that in the future we would like to hold off. So I would be I would be fine defeating this motion and then having one go forward where it's only 25% of the total ask. That's how I feel.
Okay, Director, I see Director Lennox and Director McCormick. Director Lennox?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna kind of back up a notch. I'm coming late to a lot of this information, and it might be more of a question for the manager of financial services. So to educate me and maybe the citizens of Area A, just looking at the request amounts, can you just briefly explain why the amounts for Area A are a step change above the other areas? And I know I just probably haven't seen it in the material, but there might be others that see that and wonder why.
I believe this can be passed over to Mr. Cohenhoven, I believe, unless Ms. Green wants to answer, but I'll just go straight to the writer of the report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So our financial assistance based on the Local Government Act needs to be split based on the assessed value of these areas. So the assessed value of Area A is higher than the other electoral areas, and therefore it gets more weight. They fund a higher percentage of these requests.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
Good. So, okay, thank you. Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sympathetic to the political sensitivity of this issue. I'm sympathetic to both sides of the question, but that to me is not what this is about. This is a group that hasn't come to us before. I don't remember in the last 8 years of hearing anything from qathet Old Growth. I really don't know who they are. They've presented themselves well and explained it, but you know, groups don't necessarily get what they ask for, especially on the first go round. So I would be willing to support the recommendation and see how they do this year. And if they come back next year, having put on an event, having sort of integrated more into the community so that we're more familiar with who they are and what they do, then I think that would be an appropriate time to consider a request like this. So I am willing to support the recommendation.
Okay, and to be clear, the recommendation is to deny financial support right now. Is there any further debate on this, Director Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Brandner, and everybody else who's provided comment. I think I would be probably in support of a very nominal donation to show that we are interested in conversations happening on all sides of the fence. I think denial is actually picking sides, and I don't think that's a good thing. Sustainable forest management is not against forestry. It's about recognizing all values instead of only just timber values. And most reputable forest companies are moving that way on their own. They're doing good jobs of that. I think this is, you know, a good conversation to support within the community. So I'm not in favor of a 0 recommendation. I would be happy with 25%, 10%, whatever the nominal fee that other folks could support. So that's how I feel about that.
Okay, thank you. And Director Dowd, hopefully we can get to the vote, because if this fails, it will bring forward an opportunity for a motion to recommend an amount. If it succeeds, well, then that's what will go forward. Director Dowd?
I'm just going to try to encourage the motion to fail. I think the denial is inappropriate. If the motion to deny is defeated, I will make a subsequent motion to make a donation of 10% of the numbers that are in the package.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd. I think we've heard from everyone. Is there any further discussion? Okay, on the motion to deny the request, all those in favor of denying the request? So that's how many? 1, 2, everyone's hands up. 1, 2, 3 to deny, and to not deny the request, opposed to denying the request. I'll be opposed. So that it's defeated. So we can entertain another motion if we so choose. Director Dowd?
I'll make a motion to recommend that the board approves 10% of the package that's in number 4.
Is there a seconder for that amount? Director Gisborne came up, put his hand up first. So corporate officer, is that clear? So we know the numbers, 97.83 cents from Area A and so on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're a mathematician.
Mr. Cowenhoven has already provided these numbers to me through direct message. So
yeah, it's easy to shift this decimal place and round off the penny. Okay, so we're talking about a total of does that adds up to $200? Is that correct in total? So is this is the motion before us? Is there discussion on the motion to provide that level? Director Gisborne?
Okay, I'll be quick. Thank you. In the past, there was an organization, I believe they asked for $300. And when taking a look at their budget, they had a massive budget. And I reached out to them when I ran into, I think, their treasurer. And I went like, why are you asking for such low amount of money when you have, you know, such a big expenditure? And their response was, well, we leverage that funding by showing that we have support from a local government, and then we can get access to, you know, provincial funding and other organizational funding. And that's why, you know, they're like, the $300, we don't need the $300. And this is a different organization. And that's why I'm in support of this motion, whether it's 25% or 10%, it's showing that we support what they're doing. And even if it's not a big financial amount, but it can help them leverage grant funding from other organizations by showing that, you know, oh, we did get a grant from URD. You know, they maybe don't want to say how much, but they can say, yeah, we got some grant funding. So I'm in support of this resolution. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. Is there any other debate on this? And I'll just mention my comment. One reason I support this is the event they're talking about, and we've had discussion around, you know, pros and cons and amounts, but the actual event is about lost species that have been extirpated. And so I think having a modest amount of support for the group could be good. But that said, it's not coming from Area E budget. So, you know, that's why I didn't want to stick my oar in too deeply. But I don't see any further hands up. So I will call the question on providing support for a reduced amount, 10% of the amount in the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? 1 opposed, carried. Okay, thank you. Moving on to my agenda. Item number 9.2.5 is a request from Lang Bay Community Club, and the recommendation is for approximately 1/4 of the amount that's been requested. I see Director Brander with his hand up.
Thank you again, Chair. I'd like to modify this. Approve a grant of, and I apologize, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but to fund essentially 100% of the request for Lang Bay Community Club.
Okay, is there, maybe before we get the seconder, could we ask Mr. Cohenhoven if he can give us the amount? Mr. Cohenhoven?
Thank you, Chair. The request is for $6,890.
And there is sufficient funds at this point remaining in the...
That is...
just to make sure it's in order.
Negative, unfortunately. There are... Sorry, I just need to crunch some numbers here. Yes, there are sufficient funds in the Area C budget. And just a note that this will include funds available for other items in the report. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe in discussion we can ask how many funds that would leave in the Area C, but that is in order. Director Brander's moved the motion. Is there a seconder for that motion to fund Lang Bay Community Club? Okay, Director McCormick. Is there any discussion on this item, Director Brander?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say Lang Bay Hall does a fantastic job. They've got programs going on there all the time. Lots of volunteer hours are put into the organization, and it really is a hub for the community. The outdoor lighting, I think, is really essential. There's a lot of activities that happen at night down there. And as was mentioned earlier on, there's a transit stop. So I think it's also a safety issue. I think they've asked for grant funding once in the past 4 or 5 years. So it's not like this is an ongoing thing. And I think they do a great job, and I want to support them.
Okay. Thank you. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I very much appreciate the Lang Bay Hall and the lighting that they provide. I've been there for public engagement sessions and found myself chatting with people outside in the dark, and very much appreciative that there is light there, because as those that know me, I can get caught chatting. Hearing that there is a bit of a challenge with how much money will be left in the electoral Area C grant and aid, I'm having a bit of a memory from maybe 3 years ago when there was the last time that money was requested for Lang Bay Hall, and we heard from the treasurer from the Lang Bay Hall that it also does benefit some of the residents of Area B. Now, granted, it's outside of Area B, but we do have residents from Area B, so I would be willing to fund 1/3 of the total amount from electoral Area B. So that would work out to, I think, $4,593.33 from Area C, and $2,296.66 from B. And our Assistant Manager of Financial Services can hopefully correct my math if I'm wrong. And if that is the correct number, then I would like to offer an amendment to provide funding from Area B as well.
Okay, so first let's check with the corporate officer. Is there sufficient funds in Area B for, sorry, with our corporate officer can pass it through to Mr. Cohenhoven. I think he's doing some number crunching for us. So we'll put the spotlight back on you. Is there sufficient funds, and do you know what those numbers would be? So it would be 2/3 of the funding of the original request from Area C and 1/3 from Area B. I understand the intent of the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Chair. And the amounts named by Director Gisborne are accurate. So funding this full request, 1/3 from Area B, 2/3 from Area C, will leave $1,500 in the Area B grants and aid and $570 in the Area C grants and aid.
Okay, thank you very much. So is that, do I take that to be an amendment, Director Gisborne?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and corporate officer, is it clear what the amendment is to, I guess, to revise the amount put forward in the main motion down by 1/3 and to add a clause for Area B of that 1/3?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have that out. I was just attempting to write it out.
Yeah,
everyone is clear. Then yes.
Okay, well, the words are so, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering if Mr. Cohenhoven could repeat the amounts that would be remaining in the area B and C, because C didn't sound right to me, or maybe I heard it incorrectly.
Mr. Cohenhoven.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I am recrunching the numbers.
There's a lot of moving pieces here because of the other adjustments. So, but we're quite certain that it's going to be at least one third of that 6,800. So it should be at least 2,000 something. And if Mr. Cohenhoven has a number for us, that's fine. If we need it, if we don't, we can move on. But Mr. Cohenhoven, do you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have an update. I apologize for my error. This will leave $3,080 in the Area B grants and aid, and $2,797 in the Area C grants and aid.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's been a motion, an amendment made to the main motion, and hasn't been seconded yet. Is there a seconder for that? Okay. I don't know who put their hand up first, but okay. So discussion on the amendment. So we'll come back to the main motion. So this would be to amend the motion to provide the full funding, and it's really just splitting it out, 2/3 from Area C, 1/3 from Area B. Director Brander.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy with the amendment, and I appreciate the Director from Area B's participation in it, let's say.
That's great. Is there any further discussion? I'll only add that in the delegation, we heard that, Area B residents use the hall quite extensively too, and I think it benefits. So I also really support this. I think it's a benefit for both electoral areas. So, okay, seeing that no further debate, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? All those opposed? None carried. Back to the main motion, which is the amended motion, which maybe the corporate officer wants to read out to us, or at least give us the gist of.
Sorry, I don't have the actual numbers yet, but it would essentially be that the committee recommend the board approve a grant of 2/3 of 6890 to the Lang Bay Community Club, assist with the replacement of outdoor lights and the Lang Bay Community Hall from Electoral Area C grant and aid service, and that the committee recommend the board approve a grant of 1/3 of 6,890 to the Lang Bay Community Club, assist with the replacement of outdoor lights at the Lang Bay Community Hall from Electoral Area B grant and aid service. So that was my my math on the fly.
Corporate officer, and I believe I just did a number, and Mr. Cohenhoven will correct me if I'm wrong. $4,593 from Area C, $2,296, and maybe there's a few cents either way from Area B. I actually get the cents in there. So $4,593.33 from Area C, $2,296.67 from Area B. It's nodding, so we got the correct number. So do we have discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay. Got through that. We'll see if we can make this even more complicated. Maybe this one will be easier for Area D only. So the next item is for the Texada Sandcastle weekend with a recommendation to provide $2,000 in funding. I see Director McCormick.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, does anyone second? Okay, Director Gisborne, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, so item number 9.2.7 is about Vananda Improvement District Road Rescue Program. Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I have provided our corporate officer with wording for an alternate recommendation. I might explain that the 3463 is what is contained on page 98 of our report that says that's what I have left in Area D's grant and aid budget. But I would actually like to make that 3,800 if I could confirm with our financial experts whether there is still $3,800 in the Area D grant and aid budget.
Okay, maybe I'll first ask for more number crunching from Mr. Coenhoven. Do we know how much is left in Area B as we get to the bottoms of these services?
Approve a grant of what's left.
Thank you. Through the chair, there is $3,830.89 left in the Area D grants and aid budget.
Well, thank you. 3,800 is fine. And if there's a seconder, I'd like to speak to the recommendation.
Director Gisborne. Okay, Director McCormick, you want to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. They have a lot of expenses that are not covered in any other way, such as replacing their aging truck, such as the cost of extrication tools and equipment, which they use in providing a road rescue service. And the reserve fund that the surplus funds that they had accumulated really should go toward those things if we're going to respect the principle of asset management and the service paying for itself. So I believe that they are deserving of some financial compensation from us in that it was the legal fees that took the money out of their budget to begin with that they knew nothing about. So I am asking for your support because I believe that this organization provides a really worthy service to the citizens of Texada. It would be paid for by the Area D grant and aid budget, so it's not coming out of anyone else's pocket. And I hope that we can support them.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing Director Doubt.
No. I've been following as closely as I can all the activity in the Van Ande Improvement District Fire Department, idea about Texada Rescue and how to deal with that, and the legal opinion that the board got. If Mr. Devereaux was still on the line, I'd like to know his opinion of whether this grant in aid affects the regional district's legal position at all.
Okay, corporate officer is our manager Devereaux on the, okay, there he is. Mr. Devereaux.
Yes, Chair. I think that Director Dent was meaning to direct this question to the Manager of Emergency Services, Ryan Toms.
I probably was.
Yes. Well, there's Mr. Tom. So Manager of Emergency Services, it's for you.
Yeah, through the chair, if I understood the Director Dow's question, whether providing a grant and aid would impact anything in the legal advice, was that your question, Director?
The legal position of the board with regard to liability, etc.
You know, that's a very good question. Through the chair, I don't think the grant and aid per se changes anything in the legal advice that was presented to this board. It's still a decision of the board, but the legal advice still stands.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So is there any other questions or debate from the board? Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? Oh, 5 opposed. Okay, carried unanimously, it looks like. Thank you. Okay, the next item is a $1,000 request from the Lasqueti Island Ratepayers Association. Would someone like to make that motion? Director Gisborne? Would someone second that? Director McCormick? Any discussion? I have something I'd like to say, but if okay, I'll just say I was at their AGM at the Ratepayers Association AGM yesterday, and they do work to try to protect amenities on the island, and one of their focuses is on public accesses of various kinds and infrastructure on the water and so on. So they do good work, and they could very much use this funding, which comes entirely from Area E grant and aid service. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Thank you. The next item up, and I've put forward an alternate motion that I would like to make, that the committee recommend the board approve a grant of $1,000 to Lasqueti Community Association for general operating costs of the food bank from social planning services. Would anybody be willing to second that?
Second.
Okay, I see Director McCormick. Any discussion? I have something I'd like to say, but if anyone else wants to say something, Director Gisborne?
I just have a question for our managers of financial services, which are here and very helpful as we run through this. We have a tabled motion for potential funding for qathet art. That might come before us again, whether that comes from electoral area grant and aid or social planning. I was kind of thinking maybe social planning. If we increase the amount of funding from $250 to Lasqueti Community Association up to $1,000, and that's all coming from the social planning service, what does that leave us with for potential funding? Oh, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Cohenhoven. I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, through the chair. Increasing this to $1,000. There is room in the budget. There's also another request for $3,500, and the outcome of that is yet to be determined. Increasing this to $1,000 will leave $530 in the social planning service after this request and the next request combined.
Thank you. Is there any other director before I say something? Okay. I respect and understand the basis for the recommendation from staff, but would like for us to support the full request. First off, the Lasqueti Food Bank volunteers did not include the in-kind contributions that they receive from the Lasqueti Health Center, where they store their food rent-free, nor donations they made during the year. They're a very small organization, and I think they didn't get all the information that might have shown other revenue and costs. But more importantly, the basis of a regional district is sharing benefits of services, and Lasqueti needs to benefit from the social planning service. It's very important. In 2022, Lasqueti taxpayers contributed over $8,600 to the social planning service, which is a very good service. The benefit to Lasqueti is that we all need to work together to address social challenges, and Lasqueti has its fair share of social challenges. As reaching Lasqueti is challenging for most social planning programs, the direct benefits to Lasqueti are primarily through grants to the food bank and the Wednesday night social. The latter has been canceled for the last 2 years, and it seems to be starting up with their uncertainty. That meant that they were not able to get a grant application in time. That leaves the food bank, which is carried out with sensitivity and dignity by dedicated volunteers to address a very important social issue, food insecurity. The Lasqueti Food Bank has received grants and aid through this service and formerly from the Grant and Aid Area E service since at least 2014, and they really need this funding. It's very important. The people who benefit from it, it's very important. $250 does not go very far. They're asking the same amount last year. That doesn't even include inflation, so they're already going to be able to get less with high levels of inflation. So I really urge the board to support this motion. Is there any further discussion on this? So I see Director Elliott and then Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair.
Director Elliott.
Sorry.
She hasn't spoken yet.
Chair and Director Gisborne for giving me some room. So I'm very new to the entire financial portfolio of the regional district, and I see some grants come from areas, and I'm understanding the social planning service to be a lump for the entire region. Is that correct?
Thank you. Through the chair, areas A, B, C, D, and E participate in the social planning service.
Okay, thank you so much. I think food is important, and I agree that 250 doesn't go very far. And I just wanted to understand a little bit about the social planning service. And so all regions contribute, and then we decide how to do those grants together then, right? Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was just a question.
That's correct. And if does maybe our manager of financial services has anything to clarify if that might help Ms. Elliott, Director Elliott, I should say.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so all of the social planning grants are voted on by the 5 electoral areas. So that actually the participation, you participate in the conversations, you don't actually vote at the board level on the social planning grants. And maybe the corporate officer can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, so she's not wrong. And the social planning services, I believe, an unweighted vote as well. I'd have to check the establishment bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Corporate Officer. Director Gisborne had his hand up.
Thank you. Something that Director Fall has pointed out is that Muscogee Island contributes to a number of our shared services. The way our grants work, and I'll say this for those of the public and Director Elliott, we have a number of different granting options. They're like ponds or pools. You got general grant and aid, which is everyone, including the municipality and all electoral areas. Then you have each electoral area has their own little pool that they get to kind of play with. Economic development, which is areas A, C, and D. And then we get to social planning, which is all of the electoral areas only. Director Fall or Chair Fall is absolutely correct. Muscogee Island Electoral Area E contributes a significant amount of tax funding towards both social planning and general grant and aid. If we're going to be providing $1,000 from social planning, that doesn't leave us with much money left for consideration for the Art Council, unless we're going to look at electoral areas, but then we're looking at Area D, which is Texada, and they've got not really any funding there either. So I'm wondering, and I'd like to hear the chair's position on this, or the director from Muscogee. I wonder his thoughts on having $500 coming from social planning and another $500 coming from general grant and aid. As in, because I don't think it is really appropriate to just keep taking money from Muscogee without the rest of us giving some money back. And I think the only real option for that is either general grant and aid or social planning. That's kind of my question for the assembly and the chair.
Okay, well, the motion before us is 1,000 from social planning. Whether that was defeated or modified to provide $1,000 with 500 from social planning, 500 for grants and aid is up to the assembly if they want to consider that. If the food bank receives $1,000, that will help them in achieving their objectives, which is to help people with food insecurity on Muscogee.
Then I'll put forward an amendment that 500 from social planning and 500 from general grant and aid.
Okay, corporate officer, is that understood, or is that in order? And we'll check with our financial staff to make sure the numbers work. Corporate officer?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that it is in order. Just because the principle of grant and aid service is that it's funded from those who benefit from it. So I just wanted to turn that over to the manager of financial services.
Okay, Ms. Greenan, do we have a?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so that is the premise behind the grants and aid, is that it is funded from the participants that benefit from the service. So the grant and aid general is funded by the City of Powell River and all of the electoral areas. So that should mean that they would get some benefit from the Muscogee Island Food Bank, but that's like the default rule. So I don't know if it would, I think with something like the food bank, how do you really say who benefits? I mean, obviously the people on Muscogee are benefiting from that food bank, but I don't know. I'm not really sure if that's allowed or not, to be honest.
Okay, so we're a bit unsure that now there's been a motion or an amendment put forward. Let's first see if it gets seconded, because if it doesn't get seconded, then there's no discussion. If it gets seconded, we can talk further about the merits of this. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seeing none, there is no seconder for it. So we're back to the main question, which is $1,000 from social planning service. Is there further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, item 9.2.10 is qathet Pride requesting $3,531 from the social planning service. Director McCormick?
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Director Lennox? Okay, discussion on this motion. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, 9.2.11 is the request for qathet community justice, not including lift. So maybe it needs. So I'll entertain a motion, but maybe we need to take lift. I don't know. Do we need to take lift out of it? It's not. That wasn't 100% clear, but corporate officer maybe clarification on whether the motion needs to remove lift.
Thank you, Chair. I was under the impression that they weren't independent until April of 2023. Is that correct?
Okay, I'm seeing a nod. So the motion is correct as it is. I will, does someone want to make a motion related to this? I saw Director Doubt with his hand. Director Doubt?
I just have a question for staff first. And with all of the adjustments that have happened so far, is there funding available to grant this request out of the 2022 grant intake?
Okay, I'll hand that over to Mr. Cohenhoven for yet more mathematical wizardry.
Thank you. Through the chair. There is currently $4,062 available in the social planning service budget. So this request for $3,531 is we are able to fund that.
Okay, so there's sufficient funding. Yes.
I believe we just passed that resolution. I think we're on the next one on number 11. So I think Jason's number would have to subtract 3,531 unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, I concur. I see Mr. Cohenhoven maybe nodding there.
Through the chair. Thank you for the correction again. There is $531 available in the social planning service. And I am just curious if you want a full account of all the available funds at this point.
Yes, maybe that would help us in our last two items, since we're getting down to the wire here. Would you be willing to do that, Mr. Cohenhoven?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in the general grants and aid, we have $3,500. In area A, we have $11,064. Area B, $3,080. Area C, $2,797. Area D, $30. Area E, $2,000. In economic development, we still have $16,386. And in social planning, we have $531.
Thank you. And maybe while you're being asked questions, the request from LIFT, because the recommendation was for 2023, could you let us know which would be the default services that would come from if we were to entertain something tonight rather than the recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. Typically, we would have funded LIFT through our social planning service. I should say historically, we have funded them through social planning. And that would be our fund that's restricted to $530 right now.
Okay, thank you. Director Doubt?
Yeah, so I want to be clear that the request that we're talking about is not from LIFT, it's from qathet Community Justice, that is trying to provide an important service to all of the residents of the regional district, possibly more difficult for somebody from Lasqueti Island to take advantage, but it is a benefit and can be a benefit to all of the members of the community. And I'm just trying to figure out right now if there are funds left for this application and the one that we tabled earlier from qathet Art, which also applied for funding, and where those funds might come from. But I think what I'm being told is that the funding is actually not there to grant these at this point because the funds have been used for other things.
That's my understanding, and the request is $9,000. So even with some of the revisions, there wasn't enough to start with, I think. So if we want to, so we have two options if we want. One would be the recommendation to push this request forward, and it would show up on our agenda in the spring when we review these. And another possibility would be to recommend the amount they're asking for out of 2023 dollars. So those would be the two, if I understand from our earlier discussion, those would be two options for the board if we wish to do something. Director McCormick?
Quick question. I didn't write down the full numbers that Jason was quoting. Did you say there was $3,100 left in the general grant and aid?
3,500.
3,500. Okay, so a portion of that could be used then toward this purpose.
Yes, there's another possibility would be to allocate some funds from one of the other pots now and you know, consider another amount later, but it's up to the assembly. Would someone like to make a motion related to this item? Director McCormick?
Sure. I would take the 4,500 and divide that in half, so $2,250 from general grant and aid for 2022, and refer the balance to 2023.
Okay, so the motion is to allocate or to grant, recommend granting 2,500 from general grant and aid. Is that
okay? Sure.
Is that correct? Sorry, 2,200.
2,250, but that's okay.
Correct. So that's the motion. And before we get a seconder, I just want to confirm that this is in order for the applicant. Does that fit the requirements for the general grant and aid? Ms. Greenan, maybe I can ask you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think that would fit because this is a program that is perceived to benefit the entire region.
Okay, very good. So do we have a seconder for that motion? Director Lennox, discussion on the motion, which is for $2,250 from general grant and aid for qathet Community Justice. Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, very good. That helps out. Now we're with the item that we moved from the beginning, which is qathet art. So, so the general grant and aid now has 1,250, if I'm not, sorry, yeah, 1,250, something like that. Would someone like to make a motion related to qathet art? We had some earlier discussion. We've got updated numbers. Director Bout, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that the board, we recommend the board consider the grant of $1,250 from the general grant and aid to qathet art. And if there's a seconder, I'll talk about that.
Okay, it's been seconded by Director Gisborne. Director Doubt?
Yeah, I think it's important that we step up rather than kick this grant request considerably down the line every time it comes up. I think we need to talk about it. I took from the report that qathet art is looking at creating classes after Christmas in the winter break for children to go to the art center and learn some art skills and learn to communicate with each other. So I think it's appropriate to issue this grant now, and I hope they would apply again in the first intake for 2023.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Director Elliott, I believe, has her hand up, and then Director Gisborne. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I think even though the amount is much smaller than they've asked for, a show of support from the qathet region is super important for leveraging funding from outside of our community. And I'm in support of providing more funding, but if this is what we have right now, I recommend we move forward with a grant request with providing the $1,250 at this time, or recommending the board approve $1,250. And I also would encourage qathet art to apply at the first intake in 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank the Assembly earlier in the meeting when we were trying to figure out, well, should we postpone this consideration until the next grant intake, or should we hand it now? I don't think we had really all the clarity of where money is available and where to move forward. By tabling the motion and now dealing with it at the end, I think it's the hole, or the pigeonhole, or the square peg round hole thing worked out, and now it appears very obvious, I think, to all of us as to, if we want to provide funding, this is where there's funds available, and therefore I'm fully in support of providing the $1,250 to the qathet Art Center, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think our regional district has ever provided any grant funding to the qathet Art Center in the past. And it's, you get the ball rolling, and it's, a first step, and then we'll be seeing in the future about, how much additional funding, more or less. And I think that'll be a discussion for the future, but this gets us moving in that direction.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. I have a comment and then a question for our corporate officer. So the comment is, we had a lot of discussion the last time around when the request came forward from qathet art. We ended up ultimately not funding, and we could see from the delegation, I get the sense there's a lot of support for the organization around the board. It's a good organization. We want to do something, and if they can come forward with an application next year, this is something they can have now to move forward and give us another request next spring. The request, or the question I have for our corporate officer is, when we brought this back off, we had a motion on the table to deny the request. Do we have to do anything procedurally to dispense with that? Because
technically, if you don't, sorry, through the chair.
Yes.
If you don't take it from the table,
I haven't. It can sit on the table.
Hang out on the table, and once the meeting's over, it's over.
Okay, I'll just leave it on the table. And I think once we entertain the we have a motion. The motion has been made, has it?
Yes, I understand that it's been made and it's coming. I just need clarification that it's intended to come from general grant and aid. Great, thank you. Yes, we have a motion on the table.
Okay, thank you. And I know last time the discussion also centered around where it should come from. We talked about A, B, C, D somehow, like some of the other ones, and then general grant and aid. So now this is from general grant and aid. We can have further discussion on that in the future, but here's the motion before. So is there any further discussion on this? Oh, Director Lennox.
Yeah, I'd just like to add my support to the motion, and I'm glad that we found a way to support them now, and I agree that to encourage them to get in on the 2023 intake. And to Director Gisborne's point, this way that we handled this allowed me to understand where those funds come from a little bit better, and how we can make it equitable. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? No, seeing none, I'll call the question. Manager from Financial Services has her hand up. Ms. Green.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. We've been having a little bit of a chat back and forth for the meeting, and just wondering about when we're looking at grants to these organizations, we're always trying to figure out what pocket they fit into. And so there's always sort of a, you know, it's always a judgment, like, does this fit into grants and aid? Does it fit into economic development? Does it fit into social planning? We're kind of wondering if this one, because they have the studio art tour, and you know, they draw people to the area potentially, if this might fit in with economic development. It's you know, it's kind of a cross between economic development and grants and aid. So I don't know if the board might consider funding this from economic development.
Okay, so that would be a possibility. So the two options, and I'll recognize Director Elliott in a moment, would be to pass the motion that's before us that we've discussed, and then we could entertain another motion as a possibility from economic development. Or if we really wanted to go with economic development, we would vote down this one and do it all from economic development. We can do alternately one or the other, but we have this one before us. I think we should deal with this one first. I'll hear Director Elliott's comments first before moving on, and then Director McCormick's. Director Elliott.
Thank you for Chair, and thank you for the point. I very much think that the Art Council is very economic development, diversifying our economy within the region and supporting the arts is important to economic development. It would have been part of a strategy should we make one. So it is a fair point. I wouldn't be averse to creating another motion for an additional grant development, so that our council could have a little more money and maybe do both. I don't remember the amounts, and I'm not as familiar as everybody else with our finances, but I would be in favor of that.
Okay, thank you, Director Elliott. Director McCormick.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask a question, and that is, how much money do we have in economic development?
16,386, if I remember.
16,000.
Okay.
We have plenty.
All right. So I would move an amendment then to the motion that it be funded through economic development rather than general grant and aid.
So are you amending the source or the amount?
No, not the amount, the source.
So 1,250 from economic development?
Yes.
Okay, does someone want to second that amendment? Director Gisborne? So we have an amendment, the motion before us is an amendment to change the source. So the motion, if this changed, the main motion would be funding $1,250 from economic development. Is there discussion on that amendment? Okay, Director Gisborne, and then Director Render.
Yeah, I got a question. Should it come entirely from economic development, or would the Assembly like Area B to pitch in a equivalent amount so that it tops it up? Because Area B is not a participant in economic development, but in the past, Area B contributes an equivalent amount, so that way the sum is topped up. I'll put forward an amendment that Area B contribute.
It's on the proportional rate. It changes each year.
Yeah.
So we've got.
Okay, so this is an amendment on the amendment. So.
Oh, sorry. I'm sure our managers of financial services can come up with some accurate numbers for our board, because anytime economic development is being used, Area B contributes through their electoral area grant and aid, and I have no problem with that.
I understand. So do we have a seconder for? So if I understand, this is amendment from a process point of view. This is amendment to the amendment. Is that correct, Corporate Officer?
Yes. Perhaps just a quick discussion on what we're doing intentionally. So if we take that first amount that was moved on the original motion and we divided it now between economic development and Area B, we would be looking at $1,054.15, and from Area B, $195.85. I think we have a main motion and an amendment, and now we're
Another amendment.
talking about amending that amendment.
Yeah.
Could this just be a friendly amendment?
Through unanimous
With unanimous consent, does everyone, is there unanimous consent to make this a friendly amendment? Okay, so the amendment, that's fine. So the amendment.
Chair?
Yes, Director Dowd? Yes. Director
We had
Dowd?
a motion, asked questions and made a motion with an intention. We've got an amendment to that motion. We've got another amendment to the amendment. And we've got input from the corporate officer that makes that different again. I'd like some clarity on what the chair is going to ask the board to decide next.
Okay, so I'll clarify because this is getting confusing, and I agree. If we're okay with by unanimous consent this friendly amendment to the amendment to include Area B at its normal prorated amount, we're voting. Before us is a motion to amend the main motion. So the main motion is $1,250 from general grant and aid. The amendment is to replace general grant and aid with $1,055 and so many cents from economic development and $195 from Area B grant and aid. That's the amendment. If that passes, then that will go forward as back to the main motion. So the main motion is $1,250 from general grant and aid. The amendment before us that we'll vote on in a moment is funding that from economic development and Area B at the normal prorated amounts. Does that help? Is everyone clear? So that we're on the amendment. So if we want to speak, do we want to speak to the amendment? Okay, so any further discussion on the amendment, Director Elliott?
Thank you. So the original amount was proposed because that was available in that fund. The Economic Development Fund, if that's where we're going to take it from, has considerable more money available to it. So I don't know why we're offering an amount that's so small for an organization doing such an amazing job at including the entire region and has come to us asking a number of times and is obviously deserving. And they bring in grants from outside of our community and leverage the funds that we give them into even bigger funds. And so to me, if we're going to go with economic development, which I think it belongs in, we should have an amount that's more appropriate to what we're trying to do, which is support this organization. I was okay with $1,250 if that's all we had, but that's not the case in this fund. I think we should be looking at an amount that's maybe proportional to the rest of the year, or, you know, from what they requested, which I don't know what that would be, but 2,000 sounds better to me. So I think the amount is no longer appropriate when we're looking at a fund that has more room in it.
I'll say something before then I'll recognize Director Gisborne. My preference personally would be to defeat the amendment, go back to the original, pass that and adopt it. That's what we have in general grant and aid. That's the rationale for the amount. And then entertain a motion from economic development and Area B grant and aid for an alternate amount to top it up to whatever amount is proposed. That would be my preference, but of course the board will do what it wants to do. So the amendment, we're on the amendment. So Director Gisborne, you want to speak to the amendment? It would be nice to vote on it.
My understanding of the amendment is that we're taking money. We're deciding on whether we take, you know, the 1,250 from general grant and aid, or whether we're taking it from economic development. That's the amendment we have before us. If we pass this amendment, and this is my understanding, is if we pass the amendment, then the main motion is that we're getting money from economic development. General grant and aid is no longer part of that main motion. So if we want to take a certain amount from general grant and aid and a certain amount from economic development and split it up, then I would recommend that we defeat this amendment and pass the main motion, because then we're still taking money out of general grant and aid. But if we only want to take money out of economic development, then I would suggest that we pass this amendment, and then once we have the main motion before us, then put forward a new amendment for the amount, because that would be a separate amendment of the main motion. Is that a correct understanding?
That is correct.
Okay. So myself, I'm I'm fine taking it from general. I'm fine with taking it from economic development. I kind of like taking a chunk from general grant and aid because it means the city is paying a bit extra. But I know that they're already contributing to the Qathet Arts Center, so I'm not sure whether or not the city directors would really be in support of that when it comes to the board, but I'm fine with going either way.
Okay, have we sufficiently discussed this complex issue so that right now, is there any further debate on this? The amendment, we're going to vote on the amendment, and the amendment is to change 1250 support from general grant and aid and instead fund it from economic development and area B. Is that clear for everyone? Okay, so I'm going to call the question on that amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, I wasn't very quick. I went too quick. All those in favor? Was there anyone in favor? Okay, all opposed? Okay, we're all opposed. Okay, so we're back to the main motion. The main motion is 1,250 from general grant and aid. Simple and clean. Is there any further debate on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. We got 1,250 from general grant and aid. Okay, Director Dowd.
I have a question for staff. How much funding is available in the economic development basket?
The last checked was 16,386. And area B still has 3,080 if it goes along for the right.
What was the original request from Qathet Art? My computer
Mr. Cohenhoven, do you want to, because there's the request and there was the recommendation.
Through the chair, it was $10,000.
That was the original request.
So I'm gonna make a motion. I'll just try it. Yes, as close as we are to the end of the year, I'm going to move that we take a grant for Qathet Art from the Economic Development Service for $1,250.
Okay, 1,250 from Economic Development.
And your friendly amendment.
Okay, friendly amendment. Oh, with that area B, is that the friendly amendment?
Yeah.
With unanimous consent, would it be okay for that to be economic development plus area B for a total of 1,250, Director Dowd? Is that unanimous consent? Okay. So it's 1,250 from economic development plus area B for its portion. I believe that's 1,055 and 195. So we're on that item. Is that been seconded? Okay, we see a second. Okay, debate on this motion. Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Very good. Okay, we've moved on. We can move on from grants and aid, which is always very fun. Always takes lots of time for the new directors. We'll see in the spring. Okay, is everyone good to carry on, or do we need a break? Or is everyone good?
We'd like a 5-minute break.
Okay, maybe we need a 5-minute break. So we're still have 150 pages left. So. Okay, so at a bit before 7:15. Very good. Director Lennox, you have a
I'm just making sure.
The press actually joined us. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Okay, press is here. Okay, so we're on to 9.3, BC Hydro Greening Grant. And there's a recommendation to endorse an application to BC Hydro for the community regreening program for up to $7,000 to provide trees, and that any costs not covered by the grant be funded through the Regional Park Service.
So moved.
Okay, so seconder. Is there any discussion on this item? It's pretty clear. I see Mr. Devereaux there, but I think it looks very clear. Is there so I see no discussion. I will, Director Lennox.
Yeah, just a quick question, bring me up to speed. Is there a focus for the trees, or is it general use through our parks? And, you know, what is the intent of the trees?
Mr. Devereaux, do you have a response for that?
Yes, Chair, I can. We've applied for this grant a few times now. It's provided trees for regional district properties for the most part. We've had them put in the cemeteries, and both in Cranberry and on Texada at Woodland. We've had them put in parks and in properties such as the Texada Island Farmers Market, Venanda Ball Field, and the Gillies Bay Ball Field. And this application will concentrate on Craig Park, Palm Beach, and the Lund Gazebo.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Item 9.4, budget amendment, Savory Island Fire Protection Service. The recommendation is for the board to approve a budget amendment to reallocate $9,875.76 from underspending in the Fire Protection Service operating budget towards capital cost to buy and install new batteries and do the electrical work at Savory Island #1 Fire Hall. Is there a mover? Someone want to move this? Director Lennox, Director McCormick. Is there any discussion? And I see our Manager of Emergency Services here for questions. If there's any discussion, looks also pretty clear. I see no one wanting to speak, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried unanimously. Very good. Okay, item 9.5, Community Resiliency Investment Program 2023 Fire Smart Community Funding and Supports. So the recommendation is to endorse an application to UBCM 2023 Community Resiliency Investment Program to support the Fire Smart program and to fund a regional community wildfire resiliency plan, and that to recommend the board endorse carrying out the 2023 Fire Smart program and community wildfire resiliency plan collaboratively with the Tualatin Nation and the city of Powell River. And thirdly, that the committee to recommend the board endorse the qathet regional district providing overall grant management for this project.
So the recommendation.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. And I should have mentioned, but I was very happy to see Lasqueti Island and the other islands included in the CW the wildlife program or plan. Okay, item 9.6, Canada Summer Jobs 2023. That committee to recommend the board endorse an application to Employment and Social Development Canada for the Canada Summer Jobs 2023 grant up to $17,528 to subsidize summer workers' wages, and that any costs not covered by the grant be funded through general admin, regional parks, and cemetery services. Someone want to move the motion? Director Gisborne, seconded by Director Lennox. Is there any discussion on this program? It's a very good program. I think it's great. Director Lennox.
Yeah, I just like to support this motion as one of the workers who received funding 1 million years ago at Craig Park. I understand the value of it and teaching people to work safely and as part of our park system. So I'm in full support of this motion.
Excellent. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried unanimously. Very good. Item 9.7, Lasqueti Island litter cleanup near old landfill. the recommendation is that the committee recommend the board approve sponsoring a forest cleanup near the now closed Lasky landfill with financing up to $150.
I'll move that.
Moved from Director McCormick, seconded. Does anyone want to speak? I have a few words. I just want to say that, you know, if the QRD can cover lunch costs, which is mostly what this is about, it will be no problem to get energetic volunteers to help clean up the forest. The waste manager on Lasky will contribute to this. The committee, waste management committee, advisory committee will contribute to it. As the photo shows, the covered landfill itself is very clean and tidy. It's actually looks like a nice place for a picnic, but there is some plastic and bags and things that are blown around in the woods, and it'll take a bit of time to go through and pull them out of creeks and so on. So this would be very great if it could be supported. Thank you. Any further discussion? I will call the debate, the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Let me refresh my video. Okay. Financial plan. So financial plan draft 1. The motion, or there's a motion to accept draft 1 as a guiding information. And I believe our standard practice, the corporate officer can correct me. Do we first hear from our manager of financial services and then make the motion, or the other way? Corporate officer?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Typically, we treat this similar to a delegation where the manager of financial services provides a presentation, and then we have a question period. And then if you guys want to make changes or motions, then we'll get motions on the table.
Okay, thank you. So I will hand this over to our manager of financial services.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So I'd like to do a short presentation on the draft 1 of the 2023 to 2027 financial plan for the qathet Regional District. So I'd like to share my screen now. So hopefully everyone can see that presentation.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So as I said, this is draft 1 of the 2023 to 2027 financial plan. And there will be generally we do 4 drafts. So there will be another draft in December, a third one in January, and then the 4th and final one in February 2023. So draft 1 of the plan is, I just wanted to first go over some of the things that I'll cover in this presentation. So I'd like to cover how the plan is developed, the assumptions that went into developing the plan, some notes, general notes about the services, an overview of the community works funds and how much funding is available. Got some specific service highlights and some specific notes on some services. And then finally, I'll go over the requisition and tax rate changes year over year and the average residential tax rates that would be based on what we have in draft 1. And then I'll go over the next steps and then entertain any questions. So how the plan is developed is the staff look at the board strategic plan and develop work plans to support that plan. And they also develop work plans to support the defined or perceived service levels of each service. And we get input through many different sources, including when the OCP is developed, through advisory committees, through public engagement activities, and through studies and plans, and through asset management plans. So we look at all of that input and then start to develop the financial plan. And the financial plan is zero-based, meaning that instead of looking at the plan that we had in the previous year and then just applying like a percentage increase on it, staff actually look at each line item and they estimate what they estimate that it would cost to operate each specific service. And then in some cases, for example, just ordinary ongoing operating costs, we will apply like a 2 to 3% increase on those types of costs. And in future years, most of those financial plans are based on a 2 to 3% increase. Although in some services, we do have specific operating plans that will be incorporated into that 5-year plan. So the assumptions that have gone into this financial plan are, as I mentioned, the specific costs or increases between 2 to 6% in some cases. Insurance, we're estimating 10 to 15% increase based on our budget, because we have seen some volatility in the insurance premiums recently. Return on investments, we're budgeting 2%. We might get more than that, but we want to be conservative with our estimate. Equipment financing, we're looking at about 4%. We have, the only equipment financing we have in place right now is for the Malaspina Fire Department apparatus, and that's hovering around 3.5% right now, but it fluctuates with the market. Future borrowing, I'm projecting 5%, and that might be a little bit low, because the 20-year indicative rate with the Municipal Finance Authority is 4.67%, although they are talking about a recession coming in 2023, so perhaps the rates might go down a little bit, but right now we're basing it on a 5% estimate. And then the payroll allocations, every year some of the staff look at where they've been spending their time, and then we look at where the time was spent in the previous year, and then base the allocation of their payroll in the subsequent year based on that time and motion study. And right now, what you see in this draft is based on the time and motion study from 2021. So we will update those numbers with the 2022 time and motion study and allocate the wages accordingly. The tax rates that I'm mentioning throughout this draft are all based on a residential tax rate per $100,000 of net taxable value. And it is also based on the 2022 revised roll values. So we'll have to incorporate the 2023 revised roll values before we actually, when they usually come in about draft 4, because they aren't available until the end of January. The CPI, we've incorporated a 5.4% projected CPI increase on many of our labor contracts. And we've also projected that for exempt staff salaries per the board policy. The 2022 actuals that you see in this draft are actuals to November 4th, 2022. So as we get better numbers, we'll change those with subsequent drafts so that they're closer to actual. And as I said, 2024 to 2027 is mostly a 2 to 3% increase on most items, but there are some exceptions. And the reserve fund contributions, we don't know what the interest earnings are yet, so those are to be determined. And budget allocations and spending have not yet been posted in this draft. They will be posted in subsequent drafts. A few more notes about the financial plan is that the prior year surpluses that you see in this plan are estimated only. We won't know what they are until closer to year end. But we do recommend for most services adding the prior year surplus to the reserve. There are some services that don't have a reserve, or if it's a large service like general administration, and we sometimes will use like quite a big portion of the prior year surplus in the subsequent year. And also to note that asset management plans are still in progress. So our our reserve fund contributions are based on our best estimates, but we will have better estimates as we develop more of our asset management plans. And we still need some information from some external agencies. Like tonight, we did receive information from the Powell River Library, but we are still waiting for information from some other services that we will get as we develop subsequent drafts. And also I want to note that there's no funding in the proposed budget for any changes to the volunteer fire department honorariums. So that is something that would have to also be considered if that's the board's wish. I just wanted to review the community works funds. So the community works funds are grants that are made available to eligible local governments. And the amount that the regional district gets is approximately $361,000 per year. And it is administrated through an administrative agreement through the UBCM. And it is federal funding that we receive. So we receive the funding in advance, and then staff look at what kinds of projects meet the funding requirements. And then we'll make, as we go through the budget, we'll make recommendations on where the funding, where we think the funding could be allocated. And at January 1st, 2023, we're estimated to have about $1.8 million of funds available. And our preliminary allocations in this draft are $700,400 proposed for 2023. And that would leave us with about 1.5 million at the end of 2023. So some of the service highlights for 2023 are that are incorporated into this draft. In general administration, there is an IT server and backup replacement planned. In the planning department, there's Texada Island drainage study is planned, and that is basically dependent on grant funding through the Ministry of Transportation. But the manager of planning services could speak more about that. There is also a housing needs assessment, a landslide hazard assessment, Kronfacher Road zoning. And then in the regional parks, there's the completion of the Parks and Trails strategy, Craig Park regreening program, a well at Shelter Point Park, a covered gazebo at Palm Beach Park, which is being donated by the Rotary, and accessibility improvements at many of the parks. The regional emergency program, there's the continuation of the regional Fire Smart program, completion of the Skeety Island emergency supplies container. In waste management, the big project, of course, is the Resource Recovery Center. That's the buildings, infrastructure, access road, and equipment. And on the Skeety Island, there are plans for a recycling pallet stacker. Northside Fire Department, there are plans for Lund Hall water tanks and for Craig Road Hall generator. Malaspina Fire, there is the development of a water refill station at the Community Services Office, and that is funded through Community Works. Savory Island Fire Protection is planned to replace engine number 21, and it would start to be replaced in 2023 and then complete in 2024. Myrtle Pond Water, there's a water line upgrade, which is grant dependent. There's an asset management plan to be developed, and the capital inclusion charge engagement, which is the capital inclusion charge that you heard about tonight. The Lund sewer system, there's a wastewater monitoring system, and an asset management plan is to be developed. Texada Recreation, there's resurfacing of the tennis courts at Gillies Bay, resurfacing of the Emily Lake Trail, and a covered gazebo at Venanda Ballfield. And at the community hall, there is plans to replace the flooring and the stove. Texada Island Airport, there's continuation of the crack sealing program, and a geotechnical hangar lot survey is planned for 2023, tentatively. Northside Recreation, there's the removal of the former fire hall, and expansion upgrade of the recreation center is planned, and public engagement for that is we're going to seek elector approval in early 2023. Savory Marine, there's a long-term use engineering study, and the annual dock and bottom inspection. Lasqueti Marine, there's barge ramp block repairs and an engineering inspection. And specifically Northside Recreation, again, I just wanted to mention that we have direction from the board from the June 30th, 2022 meeting to apply an additional $150,000 in 2020 from the 2023 budget and 2024 budget toward that project. And approval, as I mentioned, will also be sought in 2023. And right now the requisition exceeds the limit by $6,509. Most services in the regional district have requisition limits, and they can be increased by 25% every 5 years. This one hasn't been increased at all, but it is right now, as the plan, the draft one, it will exceed the limit. So we will need to make some changes to keep it within the limit. But that all, of course, is depending on what the assessment values, how the assessment values increase. If the assessment values increase significantly, then the requisition limit will also increase because it is a limit per $1,000. Save Island Marine, the costs of dredging have increased. We sort of had a plan that dredging would be done every 5 years, but it seems it's sort of that is why we do the bottom inspection to see when the dredging needs to be done, and it may need to be done more often, and the costs of the dredging have increased. So there may be a need to increase the annual parcel tax if we're going to avoid future borrowing for maintenance and major repairs. But that doesn't need to be done this year, but I just wanted to make the board aware of it. The Myrtle Pond Water, there is a small debenture issue that is set for renewal in 2023. So I'm recommending that we just pay out the balance of $1,777 rather than renewing it. Texade Island Airport, continuation of the crack sealing program, and we recommend continued runway reserve contributions because we know that eventually the runway will have to be resurfaced. The Lasqueti Island Fire Protection, capital plans still need to be developed, and those will be in progress. So as far as the requisition change, this draft means a requisition change of $763,131, and that's approximately $8.47% increase overall. The increases, vary by service, as you'll see when you look at the individual service plans. What that means is a tax rate per 100,000 between $69.92 in the city of Powell River and $303 in Area A. And when you compare that to last year, the requisition change from 2021 to 2022 was similar. It was $743,881, and it meant a 9% change. And then next, if you look at the annual cost per average home, I've got the average home based on the average home value in the city of Powell River for 2022, and then I've left it the same for 2023 because we don't have the assessed values yet. But what this draft means would mean a cost per average home of $361.25 within the city of Powell River, and to $1,565.47 for electoral area A for regional district services. And then the change between 2021 and 2022 was similar. It was $325.84 to the city of Powell River on an average home, and $1,407.68 for an average home in electoral area A, and then variations between that for the other areas. So what I'm looking for from the board, please, is direction at this meeting And then I will incorporate that direction and any further information that we get from outside agencies or from staff into draft 2. And that will be presented at the December board meeting, or sorry, the December Finance Committee meeting. And then drafts 3 and 4 after that. So now I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green, and that was very good and informative as always. So I think, and corporate officer will correct me if I'm wrong, right now directors can ask questions, clarify things, but don't make any motions at this point. Let's finish the presentation and the questions, and then entertain motions after that. Okay, Director Gisborne, and then was that Director Grunder? Director Gisborne? Director no.
Yeah, beside
It's hard to see which hand it is from the camera angle. Okay, Director Gisborne.
Oh, thank you. My first question, I think this will actually just be my only question, has to do with Community Works Fund. I'm looking at Community Works Fund revenue and expenditures, and I'm seeing on, I think it's page 20 of 143 of the report. And under waste management, there are 2 numbers, $20,000, $20,700, and $500,000 for under waste management. And that's in 2022 budget. And then 2022 projected, I don't, it's the 2 dashes, but then 2023, there's the $20,700 and there's the $500,000 of Community Works Fund. So my assumption is that fund, that Community Works Funds hasn't been spent yet, so it's just getting reallocated for 2023. We're not talking about spending another $500,000 of Community Works Fund. Is that assumption correct, or is that's my question?
Okay, Ms. Green.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, what that is we're projecting that funding won't be spent in 2022. So we're just proposing that it goes forward to 2023 for spending.
Okay, that clarifies my concern, and I will hand the floor over to the other directors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. Director Dout.
Yeah, so I've got maybe a more complicated question than that. Just because I think it's probably the largest requisition increase to any of the electoral areas. It's regional service of waste management. When I look at page 143 of the document in front of me, it's got the capital plan. And I'm looking at the waste management capital plan. Starts out with the waste transfer station, and it goes through a list of expenditures from 2021 down to 2023 anyway. And I wonder if I could ask staff to go through those expenditures and explain what each one is, and when the borrowing, because the first 4 out of the first 5 are funded by borrowing. Can you explain when that money is going to be spent, when the borrowing is going to happen, and exactly what the use of the money is? The first one is the commercial waste transfer station construction, I believe.
Okay, so this is on, if I'm not mistaken, this is on page 25 of the 143 page report that Director is referring to.
I was reading the wrong number.
That's okay. Ms. Greenan.
Thank you through the chair. Okay, so what we've done here is we've tried to refine the budget for the commercial waste transfer station and the resource recovery center. So we have $5.1 million budgeted for the commercial waste transfer station building, and that is planned from borrowing. And then as you see, as you go down, we've separated how each component is funded, just to make it really clear how we're getting the funding for this. And we expect that, work has already started on the design portion, and the commercial waste transfer station is fully funded from borrowing, although we do have a grant application in to the Strategic Priorities Fund, and we're hoping to hear about that in January. So if we are successful with the grant funding, then that will reduce the borrowing that will be required. And right now, we have about 45% of the project has Class A estimates. So we'll be refining the project costs as we get the more of the Class A estimates in for the rest of the project. So the borrowing we'll draw down the borrowing as we need it and as the project progresses, and then we'll come to the board for to go through the long-term borrowing to get a debenture debt from the Municipal Finance Authority. So we'll try to ladder the debt so that we don't we'll do some interim financing, and then we'll turn that into a debenture debt as we need it. So we'll probably come to the board once in 2023, and then probably another time in 2024 for long-term borrowing, because as I say, we won't be borrowing it all at once. It's as we need it.
And if I can just have a follow-up there, Chair.
Yes, go right ahead.
I believe the actual authorization for the borrowing for the project happened earlier, I think with the origination of the project back in 2018. Am I correct about that?
Through the chair, yes. We have authorization for the borrowing, and it totals 11.9 million that we have authorization for. We have only done the bylaw for the first part of the borrowing. The second part of the borrowing bylaw still has to come to the board for the up to $6.4 million. And I'll be bringing that to the board in the next couple of months.
Okay, but the hope for that is that we might get some grant funding to reduce that.
That's correct. I would still bring the bylaw forward because it would just be up to the 6.4 million. And then if we get the grant funding, we won't act on all of that borrowing.
Okay, thanks. I'm just asking that because I think it's important to address that. That's going to be actually quite a significant component of the difference in taxes for everybody actually that participates in this service. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd. Are there any further questions from directors at this point? Director McCormick and then Director Elliott.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about the Sherstad Airport, and I'm looking at page 444 of 457. And this is, I guess, the capital funding. And I noticed in the 23 budget, there are transfer from reserves and borrowing, which didn't occur because the project was not or did not go ahead as planned in 2022, and that was for the fencing around the airport. And so I guess my question is, why are those numbers still on the books for the 23 budget? Unless I'm not reading this correctly. But I'm looking at the capital revenue and funding sources for the Sherstad Airport.
Ms. Green, do you have a response?
Thank you, through the chair. I've just, sorry, I've got my exhibit opened, and so I've only got the 143 pages. So I'm just getting to that page.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I think what you're looking at is on that third page, there is capital revenue and funding sources. So what we're showing here is what we had budgeted in 2022, and it didn't go forward. So we're saying that the actual will be 0. And then when you look over the green where it shows the negative 100,000, we're just showing there the variance between what was budgeted to be spent and then what the budget is in 2023. So no, it's not budgeted again in 2023. The only thing budgeted transfer from non-stat reserve is for the crack ceiling, $5,000 for the crack ceiling, I believe. Yeah, and so no, that is not budgeted to go forward in 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Director Elliott, sorry about that.
Oh, thank you. So I have two questions. Are the numbers in our financial plan for the library, do they match the request made from the librarian today? Because I can't recall and I haven't compared them. And then my second question is, can someone help me figure out where the rec center fits in this budget?
Ms. Greenan, two questions
Thank
for
you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. No, the library budget does not match because I had this published prior to receiving the information from the library. So I will update this with the library's numbers for the second draft. And the recreation center, you will see that under in the electoral area shared services.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to find it quickly here.
Page 9.
So it is called, we call it sub-regional recreation. So it's on page 92 of 143.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's $177,000 is the contribution towards the recreation service.
Okay, so when we split things by population and so forth, how does that compare to the population split of the areas that are contributing?
Okay, so the way to see that is earlier on in the exhibit, there's a I have to find the page here. The annual requisition comparison, it's shown on page 12 of 143. That's where the annual requisition comparisons start with the city of Powell River. So when you're looking at the sub-regional recreation, the services or the areas that share in that service are a portion of area A, all of area B, and all of area C. So under area A, B, and C, you will see a line on the second part of, if you look at page 13, that's for area A and sub-regional recreation. So it shows that of that $178,500, $81,161 of that. Can you see that? I should show you my screen actually.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, that is the part that area A contributes to, and then if you go to area B on page 15, 39,000 of it is contributed by area B. And then the balance would be contributed by area C. So all of the tax rates per $100,000 for sub-regional recreation between those three areas is $7.49 per 100,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Doubt.
Yeah, it was just a kind of a follow-up question to Councillor Elliott's question. I wonder if the right staff people are online to give me the answer, but I think the agreement between the city and the regional district for that funding continues for at least one more year, but I'm not sure when the existing agreement expires and would need to be renewed or extended or changed in some way. Do you have any information about the end date for that agreement?
Ms. Greenan, do you know the answer?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know the answer offhand. I would have to look that up.
I was just trying to take a shortcut to that, and I did not look it up.
Do we have any further questions around the? I have one question, and I think the presentation is, and the material is very good, taking a really complex, so many different facets to look at regional district budgets. It's broken out in different ways that help us understand. In the presentation, Ms. Green, and in the service highlights, I didn't see the Savory Island OCP. Was that And I was just wondering if that was just maybe an oversight, or is there a reason why the Savory Island OCP, or maybe there's no extra funding that needs to go to that? Was that?
I might ask, thank you, Chair. If I could ask Laura Rodden, or ask that you ask Laura Rodden to.
Okay, I'll direct my question to Ms. Rodden. Is the Savory Island OCP needing extra funding, and it's on track to start in 2023, or
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Savory Island OCP has been included in this draft budget, as has the OCP amendments related to housing and accessory dwelling units. The projects that Linda mentioned are the ones that we are bringing consultants on to help with.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions for us? So we've heard from our manager of financial services. We have a recommended motion on, which for now, unless there's motions brought forward to make changes, would be to just bring up my motion here, would be to accept it as it is. So does anyone want to make a motion? Just trying to get my agenda back up here. Where is it? Our recommendation is that the Finance Committee accept draft 1 as guiding information and as guiding information the proposed 2023 to 2027 financial plan. Do I see a motion for that?
Sure.
Okay, Director Elliott, Director McCormick, is there any further discussion or any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. So I think that's good. And so we'll see 3 more versions of this. It's kind of a work in progress, and it's very good to see us start. And I think the whole committee is very happy to see this coming forward earlier, like we did last year. I think that's good. It's a lot more work earlier in the year for staff, but I think it helps us give better deliberations. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, new business. There is none, and we're on to question period. Are there any questions? Are there any members of the public still there? Is the reporter there even?
No.
No. Okay, I don't see hear any questions, so there's no in-camera session. We are adjourned.
This is 2 meetings combined into one because we meet in October, and that's when
You're trying to make me feel better.
I am. Yeah. Normally we would make you do the financial plan and grants.
Really well.
You guys are
Yeah.